Hey guys, tonight we're leaving behind the stress of modern life. Phones buzzing, emails dinging, that weird pressure to optimise every moment, and stepping into the warm, earthy quiet of a Viking longhouse. You're going to sleep better tonight. Not because your bed is softer, it won't be. Or because your room is quieter, it definitely isn't. But because you'll be slipping into the rhythms of a world that actually respected rest. Kinda by accident. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and the current time in the comments. I love seeing where and when people are tuning in. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The longhouse is still, well, mostly still. There's the muffled grunt of a pig shifting in its sleep somewhere near the doorway. A slow pop and hiss from the hearth. You press your back against the thick timber wall, still faintly warm from the fire, wrapped in a coarse wool blanket that smells faintly of lanolin and ash. Welcome to your first night in Viking Age Scandinavia. The longhouse is about 30 metres long and 10 across, a single shared space that houses not just a family, but extended kin, visiting travellers, animals, tools, food supplies, and the occasional wild draught of wind sneaking in through the roof thatch. You're lying on a low platform lined with dried straw, your section marked off by woven tapestries that sag just enough to give you a bit of imagined privacy. You can see the flicker of firelight on the ceiling beams, and beyond that the faint glow of stars through a smoke hole overhead. It's not exactly quiet. Someone across the room is already snoring, hard, and a dog lets out a sleepy woof before settling back into whatever dream dogs have in the year 974 AD. But there's something about the noise that doesn't irritate you. It layers in, like background static. A cosy symphony of sleeping bodies and low-burning fire. You shift under the weight of the fur blanket, surprised at how heavy it feels. Not in a suffocating way, more like being pressed down into the earth in the safest possible way. You're not alone in here. Not by a long shot. At least 20 people share this space. Adults, children, a pair of grandparents who rarely speak, and a younger cousin who sings to himself in Old Norse while rubbing his feet together to warm them up. Then there's the livestock. A couple of sheep are penned off in the far corner, separated by a low wooden wall more symbolic than functional. You swear one of them just blinked at you. If you're wondering about the smell, it's layered. Wood smoke is the top note, warm and dense, always clinging to your clothes and hair. Beneath that is the earthy tang of unwashed bodies, damp wool, old straw, and the faint metallic scent of iron tools stacked in a corner. But your nose adjusts quickly, and something about the smell is grounding. It's honest, real. You could say authentic if that word hadn't been completely ruined by marketing teams in the 2010s. This is where people really slept for most of Northern Europe's medieval centuries. Not alone in a queen-sized bed with 3 pillows and a white noise machine, but together. Packed in tight against the cold and the dark, trusting each other to share warmth, protect the fire, and snore just quietly enough not to wake the baby. The bed frame you're on is a crude wooden platform just off the dirt floor, packed with hay and lined with animal skins. There's no mattress, but the hay is fresh and springy, and the wool blanket, coarse though it is, locks in heat shockingly well. A thick pelt draped over your feet adds that final insulating touch. You're lying on your side just like you always do, one arm tucked under your head. There's no pillow here, but a bundled up tunic serves the same purpose. You glance across the room, eyes adjusting to the low flicker of the hearth. There's an old man rocking slowly on a bench, his head nodding as he mumbles an evening prayer to the Aesir, probably to Thor, because tomorrow they're fixing the roof. Over near the entrance, a pair of kids are curled together like puppies, already deep in sleep. Someone somewhere is whispering a lullaby, the melody slow and strange like a forgotten chant. Here's a historical fact to tuck under your fur blanket tonight. Viking longhouses weren't chaotic free-for-alls. They were structured, with sleeping arrangements often reflecting social hierarchy. Elders and leaders got the warmer, quieter centre spots near the fire, while younger or lower-ranking folks took the chillier ends, often close to the door where the cold crept in. You're somewhere in the middle, status-wise. A guest, perhaps, Or a cousin returned from a summer raid with some shiny new silver and a long story to tell. Want a quirk? Vikings believed your dreams weren't just meaningless brain static. They were visions, messages from the gods, or echoes of your ancestors trying to reach you. That's why some people would sleep with a charm tucked beneath their straw mattress, a small carved figure, or a tooth, or a bit of iron, to keep nightmares at bay and let the good dreams through. You can feel the lumpy shape of something hard under your shoulder. You decide not to move it. But here's where scholars still debate. Just how quiet was it really? Did people talk late into the night? Did they whisper stories and gossip? Or did they all try to fall asleep at once? There's no definitive answer. Some suggest bed talk was a thing. Quiet conversation in the half-light, just like we might scroll through social media before bed. Others argue that darkness came fast and heavy, and once the fire dimmed, silence took over. Tonight, in your longhouse, it's a mix of both. A few murmurs here and there, but mostly the sound of breathing, rustling straw and the occasional sigh from someone slipping into dreamland. You close your eyes. The straw pokes through the wool just a bit, but you don't mind. You're warm. The darkness is thick, the kind you can almost hold in your hands. Your body, after a long day of carrying water, chopping wood and chasing goats, is ready to shut down. And you realise, maybe for the first time in years, you feel safe, held, grounded. You probably won't survive this world, let's be honest. You don't know how to milk a cow or skin a rabbit or cure a salmon, but for tonight, you sleep like you belong here. The sun hasn't risen yet, but your new Viking household is already stirring. Not with the blare of an alarm clock or the buzz of your phone, but with the slow, creaky rhythms of early medieval life. Someone shifts nearby, their blanket rustling like leaves underfoot. A dog lets out a long yawn, tongue lolling as it stretches across the floor, its claws tapping softly on the packed earth. You blink your eyes open, still groggy, and for a moment you forget where you are. The straw mattress, the bitter smoke in your nose, the dim red coals in the hearth, all of it comes rushing back. Right. You live here now. Your name, if you were born into this world, would probably be something like Freydis or Leaf, depending on what part of the longhouse you came from. Names carry weight here. They tell people what clan you belong to, what ancestor you were named after, and sometimes, if your parents were feeling ambitious, what they hoped you'd become. A child named Bjorn, Bear, might be expected to grow up strong, while someone named Solveig, Sun Strength, was clearly meant to shine. There's no paperwork, no last names, just names that ride on reputation and memory. This morning you're still known mostly as that weirdly quiet one who showed up last night, but that won't last. You're already getting folded into the rhythm of this place, like a new log on the fire. You pull yourself up from your straw bed, brushing hay from your tunic, and follow the scent of something vaguely edible. A woman, tall, broad-shouldered, with a braid thick as a rope, is stirring a pot over the fire. The morning meal is barley porridge, plain and hot, with a splash of goat milk for luck. She nods at you, not unkindly, and gestures with a wooden spoon. You nod back, equally not unkindly. It's a whole conversation. You find a spot on the edge of a bench and start eating slowly, savouring the warmth. It's not exciting food, but it fills your belly and fogs up your nose in a way that feels good. Around you, the household hums to life. There's no rush, but there is purpose. Tasks to divide, animals to feed, wood to split. You notice a young boy leading a half-asleep sheep outside by a rope, muttering in a sing-song voice to keep it calm. The goat in the corner finally stands, stretches, and sneezes dramatically, as if it too has had enough of the indoor life. You're not expected to just sit around all day. Viking society isn't exactly known for its spa culture, but your main duty this morning is to learn. Not from a scroll or a screen, but from watching, participating, failing a little. You help carry water from a nearby stream, hands stiff from the cold. You learn, quite quickly, that a wooden bucket does not carry like a plastic one, and that sloshed water in wool shoes is an immediate regret. But here's the thing, you're getting tired again. Not the heavy end-of-day tired you're used to, but something slower, more rhythmical. A softness behind your eyes. You realise you've just eaten, done a bit of physical labour, warmed up, And now, there's a pause. No one seems surprised when you lie back down. This, it turns out, is normal. In this time, people don't sleep just once. Here's your historical fact. In pre-industrial societies like the Viking world, people often slept in two distinct phases, first sleep and second sleep. The first began shortly after dusk, lasting several hours, followed by a period of wakefulness sometime around midnight. This time, known as the watch, was used for stoking the fire, tending to livestock, even praying or having a quiet chat. Then came the second sleep, stretching into the dawn. It wasn't insomnia, it was the norm. Your body, under natural light and labour patterns, just drifts that way. So now, with the fire stoked again, and the goats temporarily calm, you're slipping into that second sleep. You curl back up on your hay bed, facing the embers, letting their dim orange glow blur your vision. The room is quieter than before, not because fewer people are awake, but because the quiet is now deeper, intentional. You hear the rhythmic breathing of the woman across from you, her thick braid now undone and sprawled across her shoulder. A few hushed words drift in from outside, someone talking to the dawn. And now for your quirky fact. Some Viking households believed that waking between sleeps was a time when the spirit world was closest. Not quite night, not quite day. This in-between space was liminal, magical even. People might meditate, interpret dreams, or whisper to gods in this hush. Some even kept a special dream pillow filled with herbs, wild thyme, mugwort, maybe even bits of yarrow, believed to invite visions and guard against nighttime visitors, both ghostly and crawling. You don't have a dream pillow, but you do have a tunic that smells faintly of smoke and sweat, and it's surprisingly comforting. You ball it up and press it under your cheek, breathing through your nose, feeling your heartbeat settle into the silence. The longhouse is warm again, the kind of warmth that's earned. Nothing clicks on automatically here. Heat is a communal effort, fed log by log. You sleep because you worked. You sleep because it's dark. You sleep because the room sleeps with you. But not everyone agrees about how these two-phase sleeps worked. Scholars still argue about the exact timing. Was the midnight wakefulness brief? An hour? Longer? Was it used for specific rituals, or just considered a natural pause? The truth is, no one wrote it down in detail, because it was so normal, so ingrained, that they didn't think to explain it. Which means we're left piecing together the truth from fragments, guessing at how the rhythm felt. Tonight, though, you're living it, and the second sleep comes easier than the first. Your breath slows. You feel the straw shift as someone lies down beside you, their blanket rustling softly. No one apologizes for the closeness. It's necessary. It's practical. And honestly, it's comforting. You share your heat and take some in return, and drift off together into a second sleep that belongs fully to this ancient rhythm. No scrolling, no blue light, no 3 a.m. panic. Just the quiet acceptance that sleep isn't one block, it's a tide. And right now, you're floating on it. It's still dim inside the longhouse when you stretch awake, this time for real. The second sleep has done its job. Your body feels oddly refreshed, even though your straw mattress is scratchy. Your pillow is basically a tunic full of regrets, and the temperature hovers just above icicle. You sit up slowly, blanket slipping from your shoulders, and catch the soft crackling of the hearth where someone's already coaxed the fire back to life. There's movement around you, people stirring, stretching, rubbing their eyes. It's not chaotic, it's almost gentle. Nobody's shouting, no one's in a rush. Just the quiet transition from sleep to day, as natural as breathing. Your back's a little sore, but not unbearable. What you really notice is your neck. It's not stiff. You didn't toss and turn all night. And despite the lack of modern luxuries, you feel like you actually slept. Deeply. That's when it hits you. Maybe the reason you sleep better here isn't because everything's better, but because it's simpler. The night comes, the body rests, the sun rises, the body wakes. Nobody's out here debating melatonin dosages or doom scrolling until 2 a.m. You sleep when it's dark, you wake when it's light. The end. But let's not pretend the Vikings had it all figured out. They were also out here sleeping without what you might call ergonomic design. No memory foam, no neck contouring pillows, no 800 thread count sheets. And yet, despite the lack of Tempur-Pedic tech, They made it work, and often better than we do. So, let's talk Viking bedding. Or rather, the art of Viking bedding. First off, they weren't sleeping directly on the cold ground. That's a common misconception. Instead, most longhouses had raised wooden platforms running along the walls, built-in sleeping benches wide enough for 2 or 3 people to lie side by side. These platforms were often layered with straw, hay, or dried grass for cushioning, and covered in wool blankets or sheepskins. Animal hides made surprisingly decent mattress toppers, insulating heat while offering just enough squish to keep your hips from crying. For warmth, furs were king. Thick reindeer hides if you were lucky. Bear if you were really lucky or brave. More commonly it was sheepskin. Warm, slightly oily, and extremely effective at holding in heat. There were no separate bedrooms, no doors to shut. Just these long, continuous sleep platforms where you, your relatives, and maybe a few guests all bedded down for the night. Privacy? Not a thing. Comfort? Surprisingly decent. Now here's your historical fact. While bedding wasn't standardised, there's archaeological evidence, yes, including actual preserved bedding remains, that Vikings made a conscious effort to create sleeping areas that were clean, soft, and warm. In some wealthier longhouses, beds were even framed with carved wood and decorated with tapestries to block drafts or signal social status. You can almost imagine a woman embroidering birds or spirals onto a thick wool cloth by firelight, stitching her dreams directly into her sleep space. But here's your quirky tidbit for tonight. Some Vikings believed that the position you slept in could affect your health, your dreams, and even your luck. Sleeping on your left side? That was thought to invite prophetic dreams. Sleeping flat on your back? That might open you up to spirit visitations, or simply a sore spine. No one was keeping a sleep journal, obviously, but these folk traditions passed quietly from grandmother to child to wandering scald, and somehow made their way into practice. You're lying on your right side, by the way, just in case you're wondering what kind of dreams you're inviting. You notice something else now that you're adjusting to the daily rhythm. No one clings to the idea of perfect sleep. Nobody's talking about how many hours they got, or if they reached REM. The goal here isn't 8 uninterrupted hours. It's enough rest to do what needs doing. The goal is function. Survive the cold, split the wood, paddle the fjord, that's it. Sleep is simply part of that equation, not something to obsess over or optimise. But here's the scholarly debate. Did Vikings really sleep better than us? Or are we romanticising the past? Some argue that the sheer physical exhaustion of their daily life led to deeper, more restorative sleep. Others point out that without artificial light, bodies naturally followed a circadian rhythm tuned to the seasons. Early nights in winter, late sleep in summer. Still, others suggest we can't know for sure. Maybe they suffered from backaches and insomnia too. Maybe someone in that longhouse lay awake staring into the smoke, just like you did last week when you couldn't stop thinking about the embarrassing thing you said in 8th grade. Humanity is messy, after all, but there's something undeniably soothing about this simplicity. You walk outside now, blinking into the grey-blue dawn. The sky is low, clouded, the kind that threatens either rain or snow depending on its mood. The air bites at your cheeks but smells clean, sharp, like cold iron and pine bark. Behind you, smoke curls from the longhouse roof. You hear someone chopping wood, rhythmic and steady. A chicken squawks indignantly from somewhere you'd least expect a chicken to be. Everything's awake, but slowly. And you notice this funny thing. Your shoulders aren't hunched. Your jaw isn't clenched. You're not carrying that buzz of tension you didn't even realise you had. And last night, somehow, you slept. Like, really slept. No tossing. No checking the clock. No stress about falling asleep. It just happened. And that might be the weirdest part of all, so yeah, no pillow. But no problem. You reach up and scratch the back of your neck. There's straw in your hair, your tunic smells like smoke, your boots are cold, and you've got about a dozen chores ahead of you, including scrubbing dishes in icy water and possibly wrestling a goat into the right pen. But for now, your eyes feel clear, your breath steady, your feet are planted, and your brain is, miraculously, not foggy. You step back inside, ducking through the doorway. The longhouse is alive now. Kids laughing, someone sharpening a knife, the smell of morning stew starting to simmer. You return to your spot, gathering up your blanket with a sense of strange affection. It's itchy, it's heavy, it smells like a wet sheep, but it kept you warm, it let you sleep. And maybe, just maybe, it's doing a better job than your mattress back home ever did. You think you've figured out the Viking sleep thing. Rough bed, yes. Cozy furs, yes. Everyone piled into one giant room like some chaotic family reunion that never ends. Also, yes. But then, just when you're settling into this new rhythm, it changes again. Because unlike your modern, all-night, lights off then lights on kind of sleep schedule, here, in this world, nighttime isn't one long unbroken stretch. It's a story told in two parts, and you're only now understanding how strange, and oddly comforting, that really is. Last night you had your first sleep, a long restful stretch from just after sundown to sometime around midnight, when the fire dimmed to embers and the house fell into that thick, delicious quiet. Then came the watch, that calm in-between time when the body stirs, but not fully. And now it's time for the second sleep, the kind that feels like it sinks deeper, somehow, like falling into a well of rest you didn't even know your body needed. You're lying back down again, after the morning meal, under a different kind of hush. This isn't night sleep, it's something else. A nap maybe, but not accidental. This is intended, a rest stolen before the heavy work begins. You shift, under the fur blanket, tucking your knees up and let your eyes close. Outside you can hear the wind threading through the rafters, whistling like an old ghost with somewhere to be. People around you are doing the same. It's not laziness, it's wisdom. They know that the body only gives what it has, and today there's fishing, mending, chopping and weaving to be done. So this sleep, however brief, is part of the day's work. You drift off, not from exhaustion, but from rhythm, the natural wave of activity and pause, a cadence you never quite learned in your own life of buzzing schedules and over-caffeinated momentum. Here's your historical fact. This two-phase sleep pattern wasn't unique to the Vikings. It was common across much of pre-industrial Europe. Without artificial light to stretch the day unnaturally long, people slept early, woke naturally around midnight, and often used the time for prayer, quiet reflection, or even intimacy. Records from medieval monks and early modern farmers describe this rhythm as entirely normal. The phrase, first sleep, appears in letters, books, and journals, like it's as ordinary as breakfast. But somewhere in the rush toward productivity, we forgot how to pause. The in-between time, called the watch, wasn't a mistake. It was embraced, and for the Vikings, it was sacred in its own way. This is when the myths whisper a little louder. Dreams are said to slip in more vividly between the two sleeps, messages from the gods or glimpses of a future not yet written. You think about your own dreams from earlier. Strange shapes, a woman with a crown of ice, a wolf with golden eyes. They don't feel like the nonsense dreams you usually have. These feel older, like they came from someone else's mind. And that brings us to your quirky fact of the night. During this midnight watch, some Viking households would even snack. Not a full meal, nothing dramatic, just a piece of dried fish, maybe some curds or leftover bread. The idea was to keep the fire burning inside and out. A warm belly made it easier to return to sleep. So yes, the Vikings invented the midnight snack, without the guilt. You didn't wake hungry, but you do now. A child presses a small hunk of bread into your hand, already half chewed from being worried like a stress ball. You accept it, because that's what you do here. No waste, no pride, just shared survival. The bread is dry and a little sour, but it fills your mouth with a kind of quiet comfort. You chew slowly, letting it dissolve behind your teeth. The child grins and toddles off, mission complete. And here's where historians still argue. Was this pattern of broken sleep truly universal in the Viking world, or did it vary from place to place? Some researchers suggest it depended on the season. In the deep winter, when nights stretched impossibly long, the first sleep might be massive, 8 hours or more, followed by a longer wakeful watch, then a short nap before dawn. In summer, with barely a few hours of true darkness, The pattern collapsed into shorter dozing stretches throughout the night. Others argue that it had more to do with age, status, or task. The elderly might sleep in shorter bursts. Warriors might keep deliberate watch. Children, they slept like rocks, whenever and wherever. You roll over, facing the timber wall, your hand still warm from the bread. The scent of smoke and wool and hay wraps around you like a second blanket. Someone near the hearth is singing, softly, wordlessly. It's not a lullaby. It's not even a song, really. Just a sound to keep the mind anchored while the body floats. You realise that back home, you almost never wake feeling rested. You wake startled, dragged out of sleep by beeping alarms and flashing screens. Here, your body knows when it's time. It moves like an animal following instinct, not a calendar. You've stopped checking the sky for the sun. You just know. You know when it's time to close your eyes again, and when to open them. You press your hand to your chest, feeling your own slow heartbeat. In this shared sleep, this communal rhythm, there's something deeply human. The fire pops again, sending a flurry of sparks dancing up into the smoke hole above. You watch them fade into the dark one by one. You think, maybe you don't need better sleep technology. Maybe you just need fewer lights, less noise, fewer walls between you and the people you love. Maybe sleep isn't something you do, but something you enter, like a place. And maybe that place feels more familiar than you thought. Your eyes drift closed again. The second sleep is calling. No alarms, no pressure, just the dark and the fire and your breath. You're dreaming again, but this time the dream feels lighter, thinner, like mist curling off a fjord at dawn. There's a woman with braids coiled like ram's horns, humming as she weaves cloth made of clouds. A raven circles above you. Somewhere in the dream, you're on a boat, but you're not afraid. The sail flaps softly. You don't remember falling asleep, but now you're halfway between the dream and the waking, in that soft grey in-between where nothing hurts, and everything makes just enough sense. Then, like a ripple across the longhouse, the real world stirs. You feel it before you hear it. A subtle shift in breath patterns, the creak of a wooden beam above, a pig giving a half-hearted grunt from its bed of straw. The warmth of second sleep is fading, not because it's over, but because the world around you is beginning to rise again. It's time. You sit up slowly, stretch your arms over your head, and let out a long, uncontrolled yawn. No one laughs. No one tells you to be quiet. In this house, yawns are a chorus, not a solo. They move from one corner to the next until even the goats look vaguely impressed. Someone tosses another log onto the fire. It crackles to life with a soft whoosh. The light is changing. Again, filtering in from the smoke hole above in dim, dusty beams. The morning smells stronger this time. Wood smoke, of course, but now layered with something more alive. The sour musk of damp wool, fresh breath, somehow worse than you remember it being, and that earthy, ever-present aroma of animals in close quarters. It should be awful. Honestly, it should be disgusting, but instead, it smells like continuity. Like everything that was alive yesterday is still here today. That's a comfort in its own funky, full-bodied way. Let's talk about those sounds, though. Because Vikings sleep, it wasn't silent. Oh no! You live in a longhouse with roughly 20 other humans, half a dozen animals, and maybe a couple of uninvited mice. The background noise is a full-on lullaby if you let it be, and a nightmare if you don't. Here's your historical fact. Viking longhouses weren't insulated, and they didn't come with a mute button. The typical longhouse was built of timber with a turf roof, designed more for warmth than for quiet. The wood creaked. The beams groaned. And when the wind pushed through the thatch, the whole place sang a low, eerie tune like a ghost sighing through a ship's hull. There was always sound, and you either got used to it, or you didn't sleep. One of the most constant nighttime sounds: animals. Vikings didn't just live near their livestock. They often slept with them, or at least within sniffing distance. Chickens roosted on beams above your head. Sheep and goats were penned along the walls for warmth. The occasional piglet, the MVP of radiating body heat, might be curled up under someone's bench like a meaty foot warmer. It's not exactly relaxing, unless you've always dreamed of falling asleep to the dulcet tones of a snoring goat. And then there's the human noise. The snores are legendary. Loud, unashamed, and deeply varied in tone. The guy 3 mats down from you sounds like someone trying to saw a wet log. Someone else breathes through their teeth like a leaky bellows. One old woman clicks in her sleep, rhythmic, like she's playing an invisible jaw harp. And of course, there's always that one baby who decides it's time to practice dramatic wailing at 3 a.m, just in case the gods weren't paying attention. Here's your quirky fact. There's actually a word in Old Norse that may have referred to a loud sleeper. Vernbur, meaning mill snorer. A human millstone grinding away through the night, probably mocked by everyone in earshot. Sleep disturbance by chronic snoring wasn't a mystery to the Vikings. It was a shared experience, and sometimes even a source of entertainment. People made jokes about it, teased each other for it, even sang silly rhymes to poke fun at whoever rattled the roof beams the loudest. But here's the scholarly debate. Did these background sounds actually disrupt Viking sleep? Or did they form a kind of familiar soundscape that helped people stay relaxed? Some researchers suggest that in a world without artificial silence, these sounds were comforting. The breathing, shuffling, occasional cough or fart, it was proof that your kin were alive, close, and doing what they were supposed to be doing. Sleeping. Alive bodies meant safety. Silence might have been more terrifying than noise. You step outside now, blinking in the pale light. The air is biting but fresh, like steel and pine needles. A few others are already out here, shaking off sleep, checking on the animals. You can still hear the longhouse behind you, faint but unmistakable. A creak, a thump, a burst of laughter. You smile. These sounds are your lullabies now. They're part of the rhythm. You don't need white noise. You've got goat bleats and snoring warriors. Authentic ASMR. You think back to your apartment. The dead silence of 2 a.m, broken only by the occasional car outside or the ominous crack of your refrigerator deciding to groan for no reason. There, every sound feels sharp, threatening. Here, every sound feels alive. Here, even the floorboards seem to breathe. You return to the house, slipping back into the warmth like a hand into a worn glove. Someone passes you a wooden cup of something hot, thin ale maybe, or barley tea. You don't ask, you sip. It tastes like smoke and herbs and slightly overused mugs. Perfect. And as the longhouse continues its slow transition from dream world to working world, you can't help but think, maybe the secret to better sleep isn't silence. Maybe it's presence. The presence of firelight, of breath, of other warm bodies snoring like drunken trolls, all wrapped in the same communal blanket of survival. Maybe that's what keeps the nightmares away. Not soundproofing, but connection. You stretch again. Your joints pop. Your hair smells like fire. You're not clean or particularly well rested by modern standards, but you feel real. You feel like you've actually slept with the world, not against it. And yeah, you could complain about the snoring, but somehow you don't want to. You've started to notice something strange. You're not just sleeping differently here, you're dreaming differently. Richer, slower. Like the dreams rise up through the floorboards, seep in through the smoke hole and settle into your bones while you lie half wrapped in sheepskin. There's a weight to them. Not heavy exactly, but old. You dream in colours that don't quite exist. Hear songs in a language you half remember, and always, there's that soft orange glow of firelight humming behind your eyelids like a lullaby. Welcome to the Viking sleep psyche. It starts with the light, or, more accurately, the lack of it. Here, in this world of flickering flames and long nights, there's no harsh blue glare to chase away the dark. There are no lamps buzzing above your head, no status lights blinking across your devices like digital fireflies. Just the hearth, burning low, maybe a few, oil lamps if someone's bothered to light them. The rest is shadow. Deep, velvet shadow that swallows corners and softens the harsh edges of the waking world. This is where you sleep now, inside a kind of living cave, warm and whispering. You're wrapped in wool, head resting against a tunic, listening to the slow crackle of the fire and the occasional grunt of someone rolling over. You're not quite asleep, not quite awake. And in that space between, the dreams come easier. Here's your historical fact for the night. Firelight wasn't just practical in Viking homes, it was essential. The hearth at the centre of the longhouse wasn't simply for cooking or warmth. It was the heart of the household, a place of ritual, protection, and memory. Embers were carefully tended, sometimes kept burning for years without fully going out. Children were told stories beside it. Offerings were made to the gods around it. And when sleep came, it came by the flicker of flame, not with a switch, but with a soft fade to darkness. And that darkness was deep. Without electric light polluting the night sky, the Viking world got truly dark. Dark enough to see stars you've never glimpsed before, constellations unfamiliar and haunting. You could stand outside at midnight and feel the weight of it pressing down, as if the sky had lowered itself to whisper secrets only you could hear. And inside, within the longhouse, the darkness pooled in corners, wrapped itself around your ankles, made every movement deliberate. You didn't just walk in the dark, you felt your way through it. That kind of darkness changes how you dream. It's immersive, it's endless. And for the Vikings, dreams weren't just subconscious fireworks, they were meaningful, portents, warnings, messages, or sometimes just visits from things that didn't belong in the waking world. Here's your quirky fact. In some Norse folklore, dreams were thought to be travel. Literal travel. Your spirit, called the Huga, could leave your body while you slept and go wandering. Visit distant places, speak with gods, spy on enemies, return with knowledge or omens. A strange dream wasn't just a curiosity, it could change the course of someone's life. People remembered their dreams carefully. Sometimes they'd even tell them to a local Velva, a seeress or wise woman, who would help interpret their meaning. So if you dream tonight of ravens flying backward or a tree weeping blood, you might want to mention it at breakfast, just in case. But here's the thing scholars still wrestle with. How much of Viking dreaming was personal, and how much was shaped by community belief? Did everyone interpret dreams as divine messages, or was that reserved for special people, seers, leaders, storytellers? Some accounts suggest that the spiritual weight of dreams was deeply woven into daily life. Others argue that many people probably just shrugged them off, bad meat maybe, or too much ale before bed. The truth, like your dreams, lies somewhere in the misty middle. Back in the longhouse, you're drifting again. The fire is down to glowing coals, and shadows stretch long across the floor. You've learned to track time by the fire. The bright flames of early evening mean stories and food. The quiet red glow means sleep. Someone has thrown a fur over your shoulders while you weren't looking. It smells like ash and sun-dried grass. You don't open your eyes. Outside, the wind shifts. You hear it brushing against the turf roof, a low, soft hush like someone breathing over your shoulder. And somewhere beyond that, faint but clear, the howl of a wolf. Not close, not dangerous. Just a reminder that the wild still exists, still circles the edge of firelight, waiting. The longhouse creaks, not like a haunted house, but like an old boat. Solid, living, full of memory. The timber stretches, sighs. You can hear someone whispering in the next row of beds, maybe telling a story, or praying, or both. You let your mind wander. There's no pressure to fall asleep fast, no thoughts of tomorrow's commute, or emails, or dental appointments. Just the slow melt into stillness, and into dreams that already feel half-written. You dream this time of a mountain made of bone, a river that sings your name, and a fire that speaks in riddles. You wake with a piece of it still on your tongue, like the taste of a fruit you've never eaten, but somehow remember. You sit up briefly, rub your eyes, glance at the fire. Still glowing, still safe. You're not even sure what time it is, but it doesn't matter. Because here, the darkness isn't a threat. It's part of the rhythm, a signal, a balm, and the fire, small, warm, constant, is your anchor. So you lie back down, one arm over your eyes, breath slow, heart easy, and wait for the next dream to find you. You're pretty sure there's a goat breathing directly onto your face. It's not menacing exactly, but the smell is assertive. A warm gust of hay-flavoured air drifts across your cheek, followed by a soft grunt and the unmistakable sensation of something licking your hair. You open one eye. Yep, goat. It's standing there, sleepy-eyed and unbothered, nibbling casually on a piece of your blanket as if it belongs to him, which, let's be honest, it kind of does. Because here in the longhouse, you don't sleep next to the animals, you sleep with them. Welcome to the strange, snuggly, sneezy world of Viking animal roommates. This particular goat, who you've mentally named Gunner, seems to think you're part of his herd. He's not aggressive, just confidently present. You can hear more animals moving about now, hooves shifting against straw, feathers rustling in the rafters, the wet thump of a pig flopping over somewhere near the door. It's like waking up in the world's weirdest petting zoo, but somehow it's cozy. The sounds are familiar now, not alarming, not even annoying, just part of the ecosystem you're sleeping inside. Back home, the idea of sharing a bedroom with a livestock ensemble would send most people running for the nearest Airbnb. But here, it's a feature, not a flaw. It's efficient, practical, and weirdly, it actually helps people sleep better. Don't believe it? Let's unpack the Viking logic. Here's your historical fact. In many Viking settlements, particularly rural farms and smaller villages, the longhouse was a shared structure, not just for people, but for animals too. Livestock were valuable, crucial for food, trade and survival, and during the brutal Scandinavian winters, the safest, warmest place for them was inside. Not in a separate barn, not in a little pen outside, inside, often divided only by a waist-high wooden partition or a few strategically placed logs. It wasn't just about protecting the animals either. The animals helped protect you. Their body heat added a surprising amount of warmth to the longhouse. A full-grown cow can generate more heat than most fireplaces, and even a couple of sheep could raise the nighttime temperature just enough to stave off frostbite. In a world without insulation, central heating, or even proper windows, you took warmth wherever you could get it, even if that warmth occasionally pooped near your boots. It's not glamorous. There's no cute Instagram filter for waking up with a chicken perched above your head like a judgmental gargoyle. But there's something strangely comforting about it. You're all in this together. Humans, goats, pigs, even the eternally grumpy goose that no one dares touch. You're not just cohabiting. You're co-surviving. And here's your quirky fact for the night. There's evidence that some Viking families gave names and personalities to their animals, not just for farming, but for storytelling. A particularly loud pig might become the subject of a family joke, a goose might be blamed for chasing off a rude visitor, and certain cows were said to bring good dreams if you slept near them. Animals weren't just tools, they were characters, familiar presences in the shared nighttime story. And maybe, if you were lucky, your favourite goat would curl up beside your sleeping mat and keep your feet warm. Of course, there's a scholarly debate simmering here too. Just how intimate was this cohabitation? Some researchers argue that animals and people were strictly divided, with animals housed only at the far end of the longhouse, kept clean and orderly. Others say the boundaries were much blurrier, especially in poorer or more rural homes, where space and resources were tight. In some places, the animals were practically part of the family, wandering freely and sleeping wherever they pleased. Either way, it wasn't unusual to wake up with straw in your hair and hoofprints suspiciously close to your breakfast bowl. You're adapting faster than you thought. The first time you heard a rooster crow from inside the house at midnight, you nearly jumped out of your skin. Now, it's just background noise, another part of the living, breathing organism that is your Viking home. You roll over and nudge Gunner gently with your foot. He gives a soft meh of protest and lies down beside you, curling up into a warm, hay-smelling loaf of contentment. You lie back, staring up at the ceiling beams where smoke curls and twists like ink in water. A chicken clucks above, shifting on her perch. You're aware of every sound now, not in a startled way, but in a woven-together way. Each breath, each snore, each rustle of straw fits into the larger pattern. There is no such thing as silence here, and honestly, you don't miss it. Outside, the wind has picked up, rattling the wooden planks of the outer wall. It sounds harsh, like it wants in. But it doesn't get to come in. Not tonight. You're tucked in, wedged between a pile of blankets, a snoring cousin, and a goat who now seems emotionally attached to your left shin. There's a rough kind of peace in that. You've started thinking of this place in layers. Outside, cold, dark, unpredictable. Inside, firelight, breath, noise, warmth. Closer still, the bed, the blanket, the animal beside you. And closest of all, the space inside your own body, finally relaxing into a place where it doesn't have to defend itself just to sleep. The goat grumbles softly, shifting his weight. You swear he sighs. You sigh too. You won't sleep through the whole night, and that's okay. You'll wake again. Listen to the creak of the beams, maybe even talk softly to someone lying nearby. But you're not worried. Sleep here isn't fragile. It's something you return to again and again, like a familiar path through the woods. And if there's a goat on that path, well, fine, just as long as he stays on his side of the blanket. So, let's say you're a Viking warrior, or more accurately, you've been convinced to be one. Maybe your uncle handed you a sword one morning with a slap on the back and a cheery, "Time to earn your name." Maybe you got voluntold during a thing assembly, because someone spotted you wrestling a goat and figured you had the upper body strength. However it happened, now you've got a shield, a reputation to uphold, and a very sore everything. You've just returned from raiding. Probably a coastal village in England, or a rival clan a fjord or two away. It was muddy, chaotic, loud. Your hands are blistered, your knuckles swollen, and there's dried blood on your tunic. Not all of it yours. You've eaten your fill of dried fish, cold barley cakes, and the sweet taste of success. The adrenaline's worn off. Now finally, it's night. Time to sleep like a true Viking warrior, which sounds hardcore, right? Spoiler, it's basically what you've already been doing, just with more bruises and way worse foot odour. You peel off your chainmail, well, it's probably just a padded tunic with bits of iron, unless you're high-ranking, and hang it on a peg. Your sword goes under your sleeping bench, close enough to grab if necessary. That's not paranoia, that's just protocol. Because even when you're home, sleep isn't entirely safe. Here's your historical fact for tonight. Viking warriors, when not at sea or travelling, often slept in the same longhouses as the rest of the household. There were no barracks or military dormitories. A fighter could go from raiding to napping in the same straw-lined corner he grew up in. Their gear was stored in plain sight, sometimes above sleeping benches, sometimes underfoot. Battle and rest weren't compartmentalised. They lived side by side like everything else in Viking culture. Home was where your sword and your siblings were. You find your usual sleeping spot, third space in from the hearth, just far enough to avoid sparks but close enough to feel the warmth. Someone's already curled up beside you, probably Eric. He smells like fermented herring and sweat, but he's got your back in a fight, so you let it slide. You tuck yourself under a fur, lay your head on your rolled up cloak, and let out a groan that sounds like it came from the deepest part of your soul. The aches settle in. You feel every strained muscle, every bark of your bruised ribs. But something in the simplicity of the longhouse begins to soothe you. The fire flickers. The voices lower. You hear a young cousin asking about the sea, wide-eyed and breathless, wanting stories. Someone chuckles and starts spinning a tale, probably exaggerated, definitely dramatic, about sirens and sea serpents, and a monastery that exploded just from the glare of a Northman's rage. The child gasps. You smile in the dark. Here's your quirky fact. Viking warriors were often incredibly superstitious about sleep after battle. Some believed that if they died in their sleep without a weapon in hand, they wouldn't be welcomed into Valhalla. So it wasn't unusual for warriors to sleep clutching a sword, or at least keeping it within reach. They might also sleep in specific positions, on their left side to keep the heart closer to the shield arm or facing the door, ready to rise if needed. Was it ritual, habit, or just plain caution? Probably all three. And now for your scholarly debate of the evening. Were Viking warriors really the gruff, emotionless badasses that pop culture loves? Or were they just as tender and vulnerable as the farmers and fishers they fought alongside? Some sources suggest that raiders were deeply bonded to one another, sharing not just battle tactics but emotional intimacy, stories, dreams, fears, even tears. Sagas mention warriors singing softly to themselves before sleep, or composing short poems about the day's events. In a world where death could come quickly, maybe even in the night, reflection wasn't just allowed, it was expected. Tonight, your sleep comes slowly. Not because you're anxious, but because your body is still vibrating with memory. The sound of crashing waves, the crack of shields, the strange silence of a foreign village after it's been taken. You're not proud exactly. You're not ashamed either. You're just tired. Tired in a way that only people who've held a blade with intent can understand. Your dreams, when they finally come, are sharper than usual. You see yourself standing on the prow of a ship, cloak whipping in the wind, stars gleaming above you like frost. There's a raven flying overhead, its eyes the same colour as the sea. In the dream, you speak its name. You wake before you can remember it. You shift under the blanket, wincing as your shoulder protests. Your sword hilt pokes you in the ribs. Still, you don't move it. It's not comfort you're seeking, it's readiness. This is what it means to rest like a warrior, never quite letting go, even when your eyes are closed. Around you, the longhouse breathes. The goat is snoring again. Eric grumbles in his sleep. The fire gives off a lazy glow, casting orange shadows across the beams. You stare up at the ceiling, tracing the dance of light, your fingers twitching like they still hold a blade. You've learned something else tonight. Viking warriors didn't sleep like soldiers in bunkers. They slept like people who lived with death every day, and didn't let that stop them from sharing stories, curling up in furs or laughing at the sound of a burping pig. They didn't fight instead of resting. They fought so they could rest. And now so do you. You close your eyes, sword close, body sore, heart still beating steady in your chest, and you let yourself sink. You've now shared sleep space with warriors, children, goats, and at least one elderly woman who can snore in multiple octaves. So let's talk about that last one, snoring. Because it turns out the longhouse isn't just a place of rest, it's an unintentional concert hall. Every night when the fire dies down and the household begins to drift into darkness, the music starts. Not a harp, not a lullaby. We're talking a full symphony of human wheezes, grunts, whistles, and open-mouthed airflow disasters. Welcome to your front row seat to a 1,000-year-old sleep disorder showcase. At first, you try to ignore it. You roll over, press your tunic tighter around your ears, and tell yourself it's just someone breathing heavily. But the man across the room sounds like he's trying to inhale a soup bowl. Someone to your left lets out a long, strangled snort, then goes silent. You wait. Then it starts again. Worse. Like a goose being slowly deflated by a bear. Sleep here isn't quiet. Not even close. But the amazing thing. No one seems to mind. In modern times, a snorer gets banished. Couch. Guest room. Separate zip code if necessary. But here, you're stuck with them. No earbuds, no white noise machines, no passive-aggressive pillow shoving. You just deal with it. And slowly, over the last few nights, you've started to see the odd beauty in that. Here's your historical fact for tonight. While the Vikings obviously didn't have a word for sleep apnea, they definitely noticed that some people slept louder or more violently than others. Sagas and oral tales mention noisy sleepers with humour or mild annoyance, not as medical curiosities. Loud nighttime breathing was normal, part of the shared human soundscape. You weren't singled out for it. You were just another thread in the warm, wheezing tapestry. There are stories of chieftains whose snores could be heard across the fjord, half legend, half eye-roll. Some were mocked for it, others celebrated. Loud sleepers were remembered. That's kind of poetic in a respiratory, troubled kind of way. You're lying here now, eyes open, listening to the longhouse in full swing. One person breathes in short, sharp bursts, like they're being tickled in their dreams. Someone else lets out a high-pitched whistle every fifth breath, like a tea kettle that can't quite commit. There's a deep bass rumble from somewhere by the door. It might be the pig. Or it might be Uncle Torsten, who seems to vibrate the floor when he really gets going. And here's your quirky fact. Some Viking households tried natural remedies for loud sleepers, particularly if the snoring seemed to be connected to illness or bad dreams. One method involves stuffing certain herbs like valerian root, yarrow or even juniper into a small cloth pouch and hanging it near the person's head. Was it magical, medicinal, aromatherapy? Maybe all three. If the snoring stopped, it was the herbs. If it didn't, well, at least it smelled better. There were also folk superstitions suggesting that loud snoring could be a sign of a wandering soul, one that hadn't quite returned from its nightly dream journey. So if you snored too loudly, someone might gently pat your foot and murmur a blessing to guide you home. Honestly, that's kind of beautiful. Creepy, sure, but beautiful. But modern scholars still debate whether Vikings really viewed snoring and other sleep disturbances as normal or as signs of imbalance. Were noisy sleepers just accepted as part of longhouse life? Or were there deeper fears that loud breathing might attract spirits, or signal weakness, or foretell a bad death? Some sagas hint at supernatural consequences tied to nighttime noises. Others treat it like comic relief, with loud snorers compared to pigs or ships groaning against a dock. The truth probably sat somewhere in the middle, mild annoyance wrapped in myth. Tonight you're not annoyed though, you're fascinated. The more you listen, the more you realise that each person in the longhouse has their own rhythm, their own sound signature. It's almost musical in a way, like wind through different kinds of trees. You can hear age in the wheeze of a grandfather, youth in the soft, even breathing of a child, restlessness in the tossing, sounds of someone whose dreams won't sit still. You try to find a gap in the rhythm, a quiet place to slip your own sleep into. It's not easy. But eventually, your breathing slows to match the tempo around you. You become another note in the song, and somehow you fall asleep. You wake sometime later to a silence that isn't really silent. The loudest snorer has shifted. The tea kettle wheezer is now making a sound like a dying bellows. The pig has moved closer to the fire and is grunting contentedly in his sleep. You smile in the dark. This is what sleep is here. Not an isolated, silent, luxurious escape. It's shared, messy, noisy, real. And maybe, because of that, it's stronger. You roll over, curl up tighter under your fur blanket and exhale through your nose. You make a sound too. A soft snore maybe. A whispery sigh. You've become part of the nightly music now, and no one shushes you. The first thing you hear isn't the fire or a rooster or even Gunner the goat chewing your blanket again. It's the rhythmic scrape of a grindstone. Stone against stone, low and steady. Then, the hollow clunk of a wooden bucket being set down, the slosh of water inside. You blink your eyes open, muscles already aware that another long day is about to begin. The longhouse is bathed in that familiar pre-dawn hush, busy but muted. You smell smoke, wool, sweat, and something yeasty. Bread dough rising near the fire, maybe. The daily grind has begun. Literally. No one bursts in yelling. No alarms go off. There are no emails waiting. Just people doing what needs to be done, before the sun even thinks about showing up. You sit up slowly, stretch your legs under the blanket and glance around. The fire's been stirred to life again, glowing bright orange in the dimness. A woman is kneeling beside the hearth, her hands deep in a wooden bowl as she kneads dough with slow practiced movements. She hums to herself, something low and melodic, and flicks flour onto the boards beside her like it's a spell. Next to her, a child is using a hand quern to grind barley into meal. Two flat stones stacked one atop the other, rotated by a wooden handle. He's focused, teeth clenched, arms already tired, and it's only just sunrise. You rub your eyes and realise this is the engine of Viking sleep. Not herbs, not breathing exercises, not some magic rune carved into your pillow. It's labour. Pure, steady, muscle-burning, mind-numbing labour. Here's your historical fact for the morning. The average Viking spent a good chunk of their day doing physically demanding tasks. Farming, herding, fishing, hauling water, weaving, chopping wood, and yes, grinding grain. And all that physical effort had a direct impact on their sleep. You didn't lie awake wondering if you'd said the wrong thing in a meeting. You collapsed, body aching but satisfied, and let the darkness take you. Deep, untroubled sleep wasn't a mystery. It was the natural reward for a full day of motion. There's something strangely comforting about this kind of exhaustion. It isn't the frazzled, caffeine-soaked fatigue you know so well. This is clean tired, earned tired, the kind that makes even a straw mattress feel like a dream. And in this world, everyone earns it. No one's exempt. The chieftain's wife might be churning butter while discussing alliance politics. The smith's apprentice might hammer for 6 hours, then spend the evening catching herring. Even children help. Feeding animals, spinning thread, carrying wood. Rest is communal, yes, but so is effort. You rise, stretch, and throw on your cloak. Your back cracks in several places that feel alarmingly medieval. But you're already being handed a wooden bucket and pointed toward the stream. Morning duty, water haul. The air outside hits your face like cold iron. You blink, shiver, and start walking. The ground crunches under your boots. Frost still clings to the grass, glittering in the faint blue light of early dawn. The stream is about 50 yards from the longhouse, and by the time you reach it, your fingers have gone numb. You fill the bucket slowly, the water biting at your skin. There's no talking, just breath, and bird song, and the low sound of someone splitting wood nearby, probably Eric. You head back, arms already aching from the cold and weight. And somehow, it feels good. You're in your body here. You're not watching it from a screen, or shoving it into a chair for 10 hours. You're using it. That might be the biggest difference between their sleep and yours. They earned it every night, not through stress, through movement. And now for your quirky fact. The Vikings had a curious belief that yawning too much could let evil spirits in. So, if you felt a big yawn coming on while working, you might be expected to cover your mouth, not just out of politeness, but to protect your soul. Some people would even spit lightly afterward just in case, which is great because now you're self-conscious every time you open your mouth wider than a coin purse. Back at the longhouse, the bread is baking on a hot stone near the fire. The smell wraps around you like a blanket. You hand over the water bucket, receive a grunt of thanks, and collapse onto your straw mat for a short rest before the next task. This isn't a nap. It's a moment, a pause, a reset. You close your eyes and feel your heart beat in your arms, your shoulders, your legs. You feel your effort. It's good. There's a debate, of course, among scholars. Was the Viking lifestyle too exhausting to be sustainable? Was all this physical labour actually detrimental to long-term health? Some argue yes. Injuries were common and life expectancy wasn't exactly high. Others say the constant movement combined with natural light exposure, low stress hormones and regular communal meals may have made their lives healthier in ways we've lost. It's hard to compare, but lying here, straw, poking your ribs, you're starting to understand the appeal. Someone throws a fur over you without a word. You hear chickens scratching outside. Gunnar snorts and curls up at your feet again. You sigh and stretch your legs toward the warmth of the fire. You're not asleep, but you're resting. Fully. No guilt, no pressure. Just a body easing back into stillness after doing what it was built to do. And tonight, when the fire dims and the voices soften, you'll sleep not because you have to, but because you can. Because your limbs are ready. Because the day has taken what it needed, and now it's your turn to take something back. You don't know how cold it is outside, but judging by the layer of frost on the inside of the longhouse window slits and the way your breath is curling into visible mist, it's unfriendly. Your fingers are stiff, your nose is numb, and your blanket, once cozy and warm, has developed a frosty edge, like it's trying to transform into a frozen tortilla. Welcome to Viking winter sleeping. It's not glamorous, it's not gentle, but surprisingly, it works. You've never experienced cold like this. Not the kind that sneaks up from the floor and settles into your bones. Not the kind that makes your eyelashes stiff if you stand too close to the smoke hole. And definitely not the kind that makes you genuinely grateful to be sleeping 2 inches from a goat named Gunnar who radiates enough body heat to boil a small kettle. It's brutal out there. But in here, you're surviving it the old-fashioned way, with layers, firelight, and pure communal grit. This is the kind of night where the longhouse turns into a fortress. Not against enemies or spirits, but against the sheer indifference of winter. You don't fight the cold, you nest into it. You burrow under furs like a hibernating badger. You wrap yourself in wool cloaks still damp from yesterday's snow. You press your back against someone else's and accept that your collective warmth is your only real insulation. Here's your historical fact for the night. Viking longhouses in the winter were designed not for comfort, but for survival. Their turf-covered roofs were excellent insulators, and thick wooden walls helped keep out wind. but they were still drafty by modern standards. Windows were rare, usually just narrow slits for light and air, and the central hearth, the only real source of heat, had to be tended constantly. At night, fires were banked, not left blazing, so the room stayed warm enough not to freeze but never truly cosy. Heat was a group effort, shared body to body. You've got 2 pairs of socks on. One of them's fur, the other is something unidentifiable, possibly knit from the hair of a mythological creature judging by the itch. You're lying on your straw mattress wrapped in 2 wool blankets and a cloak you're 90% sure someone died in a few decades ago. Doesn't matter. It's warm. And right now, warm is sacred. The fire is low, just glowing coals at this point. They cast a soft orange light that flickers against the beams and reflects off the iron tools hanging from the rafters. The longhouse is quiet, muffled. No one's talking. Even the snorers have quieted, as if the cold has frozen their airways shut. Every now and then, you hear someone shift under their covers, then silence again. But you're not miserable, not even close. There's something deeply comforting about the way this world handles the cold, not by fighting it with technology or complaining about it endlessly, but by folding into it, making peace with it. You're not expected to be productive right now. No one's asking you to check your email or jog or power through. You're allowed to hunker down and just be in the winter. Here's your quirky fact. Vikings didn't just rely on fire and furs to stay warm. They layered their sleep spaces like seasoned survivalists. Hay and straw were packed under sleeping benches for insulation. Animal skins were used not just as blankets, but as wall hangings to block drafts. People sometimes slept with heated stones wrapped in cloth, especially the elderly. And children were often tucked into the same bedding as parents or siblings, not out of sentiment, but because 2 bodies sleep warmer than one. That's not a Viking proverb, that's physics. You shift under your covers and feel the warm spot where Gunnar has curled up against your knees. He lets out a soft snort, then resumes whatever dream goats have. You're not sure if he's technically supposed to be inside tonight, but no one's kicking him out. You can't blame them. Right now, Gunnar is a heat source, a foot warmer, and honestly, a decent listener. And here's the scholarly debate. Just how much did these shared, communal winter sleep practices affect Viking health and community bonds? Some researchers argue that the close quarters, despite their lack of hygiene, actually boosted emotional resilience. Sleeping with family, sharing warmth, and engaging in seasonal rituals may have created stronger psychological support networks. Others point out the risks. Sickness spread easily, and privacy was non-existent. Still, compared to our isolated, screen-lit bedrooms, there's something undeniably human about curling up beside someone else when the dark presses in. You pull the cloak tighter, your nose peeking out just far enough to breathe. The air inside the longhouse is cold, yes, but not painful. Your own body heat has carved out a little pocket of warmth. You breathe it in deeply. The fire crackles faintly. You hear the wind outside groaning against the walls trying to get in. But it doesn't. Someone a few mats away mumbles in their sleep. A child giggles in response, still dreaming. The beams creak softly as the roof settles. You're surrounded by signs of life. Real, warm, human life. And in the depths of winter, that's all you need. You close your eyes again, body still, breath even. The cold is out there. But in here, you've made your peace with it. You've learned how to layer, how to lean, how to sleep without expecting perfection. And as you drift off once more, your fingers warming slowly under your cloak, you realise something. Maybe the Vikings didn't conquer winter. Maybe they just slept through it better than we ever could. You wake up to a room that feels uneasy. It's not a sound that wakes you, or the cold, or even Gunnar trying to climb over your legs again. It's something else, a tension in the air, like the longhouse itself is holding its breath. You blink into the dim light, half expecting to find everyone wide-eyed and whispering. But no, people are still sleeping, curled up in their furs, softly breathing. Only the fire seems to notice, its low glow flickering against the far wall like it's trying to warn you. Then you remember, this is the night you were warned about. The longhouse mother, the tall, quiet one who bakes and rarely smiles, mentioned it earlier while plucking a chicken. "Tonight," she said in a flat voice, "keep your dreams to yourself." You had laughed, mostly because she'd said it while holding a very sharp knife. But now, lying here in the dark, you aren't laughing. Because this is the night the spirits walk, or so the old stories claim. Welcome to the sleep superstitions of the Viking world. Tonight, you're not just sleeping. You're doing it while trying not to invite the attention of anything extra. Here's your historical fact. Vikings were deeply spiritual people, and nighttime held a unique place in their belief system. The hours after sunset weren't just for rest. They were a liminal space when the veil between the worlds was thin. Spirits, both helpful and malevolent, were thought to move more freely after dark. Dreams were often interpreted as omens, and strange nighttime noises weren't dismissed. They were examined. That creak in the rafters could be wind, could be a warning. You lie still under your blanket, breathing shallowly, listening. There's a rustling near the back wall, a soft scrape of straw, then silence. Probably just a sheep shifting in its pen. Probably. Then, from somewhere farther off, a low whistle, like wind through the grass. But the wind tonight is calm. You pull your cloak tighter, your skin prickling despite the warmth. Your quirky fact tonight? Some Vikings believed that if you dreamed too vividly, especially of people who had died, you needed to perform a small ritual in the morning to avoid bad luck. That might mean placing your feet on bare earth as soon as you wake up, or whispering the dream aloud to the fire before breakfast. Some dreamers would even spit into the ashes, or toss in a pinch of salt just to be safe. It wasn't paranoia, it was precaution, a little offering to the unknown just in case the dream world had followed you home. You're not the only one awake. Someone across. The longhouse is whispering quietly, not talking to anyone, more like reciting. It's too soft to make out the words, but the cadence is familiar. A prayer. Maybe to Thor for protection. Maybe to Freya, the goddess of dreams and love. Maybe just a bedtime bargain with the gods. Keep the spirits outside and I won't burn the porridge again. You close your eyes again, but this time sleep comes slow. Your mind drifts toward old stories you've heard since arriving. Like the one about the Mara, a creature that slips through the smoke hole at night and sits on your chest, stealing your breath. If you've ever woken up paralyzed and gasping, unable to move, congratulations, you've had a visit from her. Or so they say. In truth, it sounds a lot like sleep paralysis. But in this world, there's no word for that. Just the Mara and her cold, invisible weight. There's also the Draugr, restless dead who walk at night, especially if buried improperly or dishonoured in life. They don't knock, they just enter. And then there are the dreams that aren't dreams at all. Visitations, ancestors giving warnings, gods testing your resolve, lovers who died in battle, returning with a kiss that freezes your lips. It's no wonder people here treat dreams with caution. You don't just roll over and forget what you saw. You sit with it, you interpret it, you protect yourself from it. And here's the scholarly debate. Were Viking dreams truly considered supernatural experiences, or have we simply romanticised them through later saga accounts? Some experts argue that dream interpretation was a fringe practice, reserved for vulvas and mystics. Others believe it was woven into everyday life, that even farmers paid attention to what their sleeping minds revealed. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Not everyone dreamed of Odin riding an 8-legged horse. But if you dreamed of drowning 3 nights in a row, you talk about it. You lie there now, eyes wide in the dark, trying to remember your last dream. It was vague. Trees maybe, snow falling upward, a woman standing by a frozen lake, humming a tune you almost knew. You didn't think much of it when you first woke, but now it feels heavier, like it meant something. You whisper it to yourself just once. Then, without really thinking, you touch your fingers to the floor and rest them on the edge of the fire pit, just in case. The longhouse is quiet again. No more whispers, no more rustling, just the steady sound of sleeping breath and the faint crackle of a settling log. The air smells like pine smoke and wool. You let yourself relax, slowly, muscle by muscle. You're not afraid. Not really. But you are respectful. Of the dark. Of the old stories. Of the way your heartbeat feels louder on nights like this. And maybe that's the most Viking thing you've done all week. Not fighting the fear, just acknowledging it, making room for it. Then tucking it in under your blanket and going back to sleep anyway. So you do, and if something walks across the roof tonight, you won't hear it, or you'll pretend you didn't. You wake up with a distinct feeling that someone has taken over your side of the bed. Not metaphorically, literally. You crack one eye open and yep, there it is, a boot, someone else's, parked firmly on the corner of your fur blanket. You lift your head just enough to look around and take in the full situation. You're no longer sleeping alone, not even close. On your left, a teenage boy is wrapped in what looks like an old sail, mouth wide open in heroic snoring. On your right, a woman you've only seen at a distance, someone's aunt possibly, has curled into the straw beside you and is now using your shoulder as a pillow. This is not unusual. This is longhouse sleep hierarchy. You're learning now that in Viking times, where you slept and who you slept near wasn't just about comfort. It was about status, family, fire proximity, and whether or not your cousin came home drunk and decided your spot was actually his spot. Let's get into it. Here's your historical fact. Sleeping arrangements in Viking longhouses weren't a free-for-all. These communal dwellings, often housing 20 to 30 people, had a rough structure. The hearth was central, literally and socially. Those with higher status or older age slept closest to the fire for warmth and convenience. Elders, the household head, warriors, or honoured guests got prime real estate. Everyone else radiated outward, with children, farm hands, and lower status family members packed closer to the walls or near the doors, where the cold came in and occasionally the goats. It wasn't a rigid system. It wasn't assigned seating. But over time, a sort of unspoken order emerged. You could tell a lot about someone just by where they unrolled their blanket. And right now, your spot, slightly warm, somewhat central, is prime enough that people are slowly migrating toward it. You've gone from that weird new cousin to warm body with real estate. And in this world, that's social progress. You try to reclaim a bit of blanket from the sail-wrapped teenager, who responds by flopping a limb directly over your shins. Great. Now you're a mattress extension. You let out a quiet sigh and shift slightly, trying not to wake the aunt on your shoulder. She snores softly, like a cat purring with a mild chest cold. You don't mind. At this point, it's all part of the atmosphere. Here's your quirky fact. Vikings sometimes used embroidered or decorated textiles to mark out personal sleeping areas, especially in wealthier households. These weren't full curtains, but woven hangings or animal skins that acted as visual cues. This is my space. It didn't mean privacy in the modern sense, but it did offer a sense of boundary, however soft and symbolic. Some of these tapestries featured protective symbols, like runes or stylized animals, meant to ward off bad dreams or envy. So yes, your bedding was also your social media profile, except instead of live, laugh, love, it was more like don't touch my furs or die screaming. You're starting to understand that sleep wasn't solitary here. It was layered into social structure. Where you sleep, who sleeps next to you, how much space you have. It's all information. It's hierarchy without needing to say it out loud. And it's incredibly functional. People share warmth. They share security. They wake each other if something's wrong. And they gently remove your foot from their ribcage if you roll over too enthusiastically. Sorry, Eric. Of course, scholars still argue over how formal these arrangements really were. Some believe every family had assigned spots, with the same people returning to the same areas night after night, even marking their space with personal items. Others argue it was more fluid. First come, first sleep. Most agree it probably varied from household to household depending on size, wealth, and how many goats were involved. You lie still, eyes open, thinking about your modern bedroom, your memory foam mattress, your temperature-controlled blankets, your bedside lamp and phone charger and noise-cancelling fan. You remember how, despite all that, you still lay awake most nights, brain buzzing like a beehive on espresso. How you turned over 5 times before finding the right position. How even then you weren't sure if you'd really fall asleep. Here, it's different. Your body takes what it can get. It doesn't fuss. It settles. Even now, pinned beneath 2 people and a blanket that smells like wet sheep and smoked fish, you're more relaxed than you've been in months. There's something deeply human about the closeness. Messy, maybe, but calming. No one's alone. No one's left out in the cold. You're part of a nest, a herd, a team of heat-conserving mammals just trying to make it through the night. Someone stirs at the edge of the hearth. A young girl, maybe 6 or 7, tiptoes across the room with the stealth of a miniature elk and slips into a warm gap between her parents. No one comments, no one even opens their eyes. She sighs happily, wraps herself in the nearest blanket edge, and disappears into the straw like a small wool-wrapped burrito. You close your eyes again. The snoring resumes. The room breathes. You shift slightly to make room for the aunt, who now appears to be drooling on your tunic. It's fine. It's all fine. The cold outside doesn't matter. The chaos doesn't matter. You're warm. You're surrounded. You're inside the web of sleep that this house weaves every night. And sure, you don't have your own bed, but somehow you've never slept better. It's late. Not that you have a clock or anything, but you can feel it. The long, drowsy stretch of night when everything finally begins to slow down. Even the fire has given up pretending it, wants to keep burning. The coals pulse quietly, barely lighting the room. Most of the longhouse is asleep, and the people who aren't are lying still, eyes open, thoughts drifting like smoke into the rafters. You're one of them now. Staring at the ceiling, counting faint cracks in the beams, blinking slowly. There's no rush to fall asleep. No glowing numbers on a digital alarm telling you what you're losing. No stress about tomorrow's 7:30 meeting, or whether you're hitting your REM quota. There's just nothing. You're here, in a dark, crowded wooden room pressed between a goat and someone who breathes like a forge bellows, and you're bored. Utterly, completely bored. And for the first time in a long while, that's a gift. This is what people had before the age of distractions. No books to flip through in bed, no scrolling, no just one more episode, no blue glow to keep you suspended in that half-awake purgatory. Just darkness, stillness, and the quiet company of other people trying to sleep. You roll over, you yawn, you stare into the dark, and then, eventually, because there's nothing else to do, you drift off. Here's your historical fact. Pre-industrial societies, including Viking communities, didn't treat nighttime like a productivity black hole. It was accepted, expected, that you'd have periods of rest, boredom, or stillness without needing to fill the silence. The concept of entertainment before bed didn't really exist. People ended their day with slow tasks, conversation, or quiet rituals. No stimulus, just the winding down of the body and the mind, naturally guided by firelight and fatigue. And yes, boredom played a role. Real, honest boredom, the kind where you have no option but to wait, and waiting leads to yawning, and yawning leads to sleep. You remember what it's like back home, lying in bed, staring at your phone, flipping between 10 apps trying to find one that holds your attention. You're exhausted, but overstimulated. Sleep is something you have to convince yourself to do. Here, it's something that just arrives. You're not fighting your brain. You're not coaxing it with melatonin gummies and sleepy tea blends with names like Moon Calm. You're just letting yourself exist in the quiet until sleep shows up and takes you. You sit up slightly wrapped in your blanket and look around. A few dim shapes are moving. Someone near the fire stirs the coals with a stick. Maybe they're just thinking. Maybe they woke up and aren't ready to go back under yet. You watch the embers flicker orange on their face, lighting their cheekbones and casting long shadows on the wall. Here's your quirky fact. In some parts of the Norse world, boredom wasn't a negative. It was considered a kind of mental rest. There's even a term, degradrotten, loosely meaning the lord of the day, used in poetry to describe time passing in silence or inactivity, especially during dark, slow hours. Some Vikings even used the stillness of the night to compose verses or rehearse stories silently in their minds. This wasn't insomnia, it was just part of the rhythm. They didn't call it wasted time, they called it part of the night. And that leads us to the academic debate. Was this quiet, low-stimulus nighttime rest better for human psychology? Some researchers say yes, arguing that our ancestors' lack of artificial light and mental overload allowed their brains to enter sleep states more easily. Others point out that boredom could also invite anxiety or ruminating thoughts, and not everyone responded to it calmly. But in either case, the key difference is expectation. Back then, people expected to be still. Now, we expect to be entertained. The pressure to squeeze value from every waking minute might be what's keeping us from resting at all. You lie back down, feeling the quiet settle over your skin. It's thick, not oppressive, just heavy enough to make your limbs sink into the straw a little deeper. You turn your head and find the room filled with vague shapes. The outline of sleeping bodies, a few hands peeking from under blankets, the soft rise and fall of someone's chest. It's like a living diorama of rest, and you're part of it now. Your thoughts move slowly, not anxiously, just slowly. You find yourself remembering things you didn't even know you still had stored. Words to a song your grandmother used to hum, the smell of rain on pavement, that one book you never finished reading. And it all floats by, soft and untethered. You don't need to do anything with it. You're just watching your own mind meander until sleep catches it mid-step. The fire pops once, a tiny spark jumping into the air. No one stirs. Even the goat is still tonight. You think about how strange it is that this boredom, this nothingness, is the exact thing modern life has trained you to avoid. We fill it. We fight it. We fear it. But here, it's the invitation, the lullaby, the soft little whisper that says, you can let go now. So you do. You stop thinking about the time. You stop wondering if you're tired enough. You don't plan your morning. You don't evaluate your breathing. You don't count sheep, though one just sneezed loudly from somewhere near the wall. You just lie still. And then, not all at once, but gently, you fall asleep. Not because you tried, but because there was nothing else to do. The sun never really rises here in winter, not fully. Instead, it kind of suggests itself. A dim grey glow creeps across the sky like a shy candle peeking into a room of heavy sleepers. You squint into it from the longhouse doorway, arms folded under your cloak, breath puffing visibly in the frigid air. You've been awake for a while now, but not because of an alarm. You woke because your body decided the night was done. Not with panic, not with regret, just a natural stretching sense of enough. It's morning, technically, but let's be honest, it's hard to tell. The world is still half asleep. The trees are bare and motionless. Frost clings to everything in sight. And above you, the sky's the colour of wet wool. The light that exists is soft and colourless, like the world can't commit to being awake either. Welcome to the Viking winter schedule, where the days are short, the nights are longer, and the line between sleep and waking gets so blurry it basically dissolves. You shuffle back inside, brushing frost from your boots. The longhouse smells like it always does. Smoke, wool, warm bodies, and something sour you've stopped questioning. Most people are still wrapped in their furs, dozing in a sort of half-sleep that isn't quite napping and isn't quite productivity. It's just being, and that's exactly what this time of year is for. Here's your historical fact. In the far north, Viking communities adapted their daily rhythms to the extreme seasons. In summer, with nearly endless daylight, work days stretched long. People fished, farmed, repaired ships, and filled every hour with motion. But in winter, when the sun might not rise for weeks in some places, everything slowed. Sleep became more flexible. People dozed more during the day, sat awake in the middle of the night, and lived in a kind of quiet rhythm guided by firelight and instinct, not clocks. It wasn't laziness, it was survival. Your eyes wander the room. Some people are sitting up now, sipping warm drinks, thin ale or fermented whey, while wrapped in their cloaks like sleepy burritos. A boy peeks out from under a fur and immediately regrets it, retreating back into the warmth like a turtle. A couple of women are spinning wool near the hearth, fingers moving automatically. Even work here seems slower, softened by the cold. You find yourself marvelling at the strange freedom of seasonal sleep. Back home, your schedule never changed no matter what the sky did. You were expected to be alert at 7 a.m, whether it was July or January, but here, light equals life. If there's no light, the world simply doesn't ask much of you. It's not depression, it's just winter, and everyone agrees to take it slow. Here's your quirky fact. In some Norse traditions, the long winter nights were considered ideal for dreams of prophecy. Certain nights, especially during Jol, the midwinter festival, were believed to thin the boundary between the living and the dead. Sleeping during these nights, especially near the hearth, was said to invite visions. People even left a space near the fire for ancestors to rest beside them during these sacred nights, just in case a departed soul wanted to visit. So yes, you might be accidentally spooning a ghost. It's fine. Just don't steal their blanket. Tonight feels like one of those nights, or mornings, or whatever liminal hour this is. You sit down near the fire and stretch your legs, savouring the brief kiss of warmth. The coals are still glowing, carefully tended even in the slowest hours. The longhouse is never truly cold, not while it's full of sleeping bodies and steady breath and the quiet heartbeat of the fire. Now for the scholarly debate. Did these seasonal sleep habits affect Viking productivity or mental health in measurable ways? Some researchers believe the slower pace of winter life was restorative, allowing the body to heal, the mind to reflect, and families to bond more deeply. Others argue that extreme darkness could lead to lethargy, sadness, or isolation, especially in communities with limited resources. The truth likely depends on who you were. If you were well-fed and surrounded by kin, winter was a time of stories and sleep. If you were hungry and alone, it was survival by inches. You lie back down for a moment, cloak wrapped tight, head on your rolled-up tunic. There's no pressure to get moving, no one's shouting. The animals aren't even fully awake yet. Gunnar the goat opens one eye and then decides he's not emotionally prepared for another cold morning. He closes it again. And here's the thing. You could get used to this. The slowness. The acceptance that life moves differently in winter. The way everyone shifts into a shared mode of the rest. No shame. No guilt. Just human beings respecting the natural rhythm of their world. You watch a faint beam of greyish light creep along the floorboards. It inches toward the fire, trying to warm itself. You're not sure if it's sunrise or just a particularly enthusiastic patch of fog. Doesn't matter. It's enough to mark the hour, or more accurately, to not mark it. Because here, you don't live by the hour. You live by the warmth of the fire, the weight of the blanket, and the subtle nudge of your body saying, "Okay, I think we can try again now." So you sit up. You stretch. You yawn in a long, theatrical way that would definitely invite an evil spirit by Old Norse standards, but no one seems concerned. You're not fully awake, but you're rested, or resting, and maybe that's the whole idea. In the world of endless winter nights, sleep isn't just a place you visit. It's something you weave in and out of all day, like smoke, like breath, like light. You're sitting near the hearth now, knees pulled in, sipping from a carved wooden cup filled with something warm and a little sour. Probably fermented milk, possibly something that's trying to become cheese. You're not sure, and honestly you've stopped asking. What matters more is that it's warm, and that it's yours. The fire crackles lazily beside you, sending soft bursts of heat over your boots and up through your cloak. Across the longhouse, people are beginning to stir, slowly, like thawing moss. No one rushes. There's no point. The cold will still be there when they stand. This is what passes for morning in a Viking winter. Not a blaring alarm or a dopamine-depleting glance at your phone, but a slow, shared quiet. The kind where people nod instead of speak, and let warmth come before work. You're still wrapped in layers of wool, and you've got that slept-in, slightly smoky feeling that can't be scrubbed away, only embraced. You're not clean, not exactly, but you're comfortable. That's the word, comfortable. Which, let's face it, isn't how most of your mornings used to feel. You lean back against the wall and breathe in. Smoke, earth, wool, fermented, something. You're surrounded by people and animals and a generous coating of dust. And yet, you're the most relaxed you've been in years. Why? You're beginning to realize it has something to do with an old, slow, almost untranslatable concept that modern life stole and repackaged. The Vikings didn't call it anything. But we might know it today as hygge. Here's your historical fact. While the Danish word hygge didn't enter written language until centuries after the Viking era, its roots stretch much deeper. It likely evolved from Old Norse words like hugga, meaning to comfort, or to console. And while Vikings weren't exactly famous for their emotional vulnerability, they absolutely knew the value of coziness, warmth, and shared domestic life. Especially during the long, dark months when battle and farming gave way to stories and rest. You're surrounded by it now. This warmth that isn't just physical, it's social. You're not alone. You're not expected to hustle. You're not trying to win the morning, you're just present. Blankets are shared, meals are simple but hot, and even silence feels like company. There's no shame in sitting close to the fire with your knees tucked in. No guilt in taking your time to fully wake. It's not indulgence, it's survival. But it also feels like something gentler, something sacred. Across the room, a mother helps a child lace up their fur boots. They don't speak. The child leans into her arm like a sleepy puppy, and she tugs the leather ties tight with practiced ease. It's not dramatic, it's not sentimental, but it's warm. You watch them, and something in you softens. Here's your quirky fact. Vikings, despite their rough and rugged reputation, actually had a deep appreciation for comfort, at least within their own homes. Bedding was made carefully, layered and fluffed with straw and animal skins. Decorative carvings adorned benches and hearth frames. Candles made from tallow were placed near sleeping areas, not just for light, but for a sense of calm. And in some households, a family's best furs were reserved for communal use during winter evenings, laid out for everyone to share during story time or feasting. Comfort wasn't selfish, it was communal. And here's the scholarly debate of the hour. How much of this warmth and coziness was intentional, and how much was simply practical? Some historians argue that comfort wasn't a goal in Viking homes. It was a byproduct of necessity. Thick furs, central fires, and shared sleeping spaces weren't designed for emotional well-being. They were just how you didn't die in a snowstorm. But others point out the touches of gentleness that feel too human to ignore. The embroidered blankets, the carved spoons, the careful rituals around rest and fire. Maybe they didn't call it comfort, but they knew what it was. You're beginning to understand that now. That warmth isn't just about temperature. It's about tone. It's about being surrounded by signs that someone thought this space, this moment, this sleep mattered. And here, it does. No one rolls their eyes at your extra blanket. No one jokes about the way you lean a little closer to the fire, or how you fall asleep with your hand tucked under your chin. You're not too much. You're just one of many, resting together, surviving winter together. Someone ladles out more stew from the pot. The scent of garlic and fish fills the room. You hear quiet conversation beginning to rise, soft laughs, a teasing voice, the gentle clatter of a wooden bowl dropped and caught. The fire glows brighter now, fed with fresh logs. You stretch your legs out, warmed by the heat, and think, this is what we've lost. Not the fire or the furs or the stew, but the permission, the shared, unspoken agreement that it's okay to slow down, to nest, to be close. That sleep isn't something to rush, and waking isn't something to conquer, and no one here is chasing optimization. No one's tracking their sleep cycles or worrying about morning routines. They're just here, existing, warm and weary, moving from sleep to wakefulness like fish rising through slow water. You wrap your cloak tighter and rest your chin on your knees. Outside, the grey light lingers. It won't get much brighter than this today. But in here, everything glows. And in that glow you feel a kind of peace you didn't realise you were missing. Not silence, not solitude, but shared stillness. There's a new sound in the longhouse tonight. Not the usual snoring or goats scratching their sides against the walls or the soft muttering of someone half asleep and swatting at a dream mosquito. No, this sound is deliberate, rhythmic, a low, steady voice rising and falling like waves. You roll over, your face half buried in your cloak, and squint toward the hearth. There, in the flickering firelight, sits the old man everyone just calls Far-Far. Father's father, though no one seems sure whose exactly. He's wrapped in a heavy fur, the lines in his face as deep as axe cuts in pine, and he's telling a story. Not just any story, a saga. And just like that, bedtime in the Viking world shifts from sleep to story. You pull yourself upright, blanket still draped over your shoulders. Around the fire, a few others have gathered. Kids with wide eyes, women still braiding their hair for sleep, warriors lounging against the wall like large, slightly smelly cats. Everyone's quiet, listening. Even the dog by the door is watching Farfar, ears perked. You slide into the group, sitting cross-legged on the fur-lined bench, letting the warmth of the fire and the rhythm of the words wrap around you like another layer of wool. Here's your historical fact. Storytelling was a crucial part of Viking life, especially during long winter nights. With no written language in common use until later centuries, history, values, and cultural identity were passed down orally. Sagas, long, poetic tales of family feuds, legendary battles, heroic journeys, and the occasional dragon, were not just entertainment, they were education. Entertainment with consequences. If you couldn't recite your grandfather's victories by the age of 10, what were you even doing? And the best part, these stories weren't whispered from behind a lectern. They were told like this, by firelight, in the middle of the longhouse, with an audience half dressed for bed and entirely ready for adventure. You shift closer, catching the shape of the tale as it unfolds. Farfar is describing a storm at sea now, his hands lifting as if he's actually pushing the wind away. His voice is gravel, but every word lands. He pauses for effect. Someone coughs. A log shifts in the fire. And then the story deepens. Here's your quirky fact. Certain Viking households had a designated storyteller, a person whose job it was to remember, embellish, and perform the oral sagas during evenings and gatherings. These weren't always the oldest people either. Sometimes it was a clever child or a poetic blacksmith, or the widow who could mimic 10 different voices and make children laugh until they cried. These storytellers didn't just pass the time, they shaped identity, and in some rare cases they were paid in food, firewood, or shelter for their services. A bedtime bard, if you will. Farfar is on a roll now. The hero of the story has just insulted a jarl, battled 3 berserkers, and sailed home with a necklace made from walrus tusks and enemy teeth. Everyone murmurs their approval. Someone hisses dramatically when he mentions a cursed sword. One of the younger boys punches the air in victory when the hero wins a duel. This isn't a quiet bedtime story, it's a collective dream. But here's where the scholars split hairs. How historically accurate were these sagas, really? Some argue that they're mostly fiction, myth wrapped in a veneer of history, passed down and reshaped by every generation. Others insist there's truth beneath the drama, like a fossil buried in layers of storytelling sediment. Names, events, places. They might have started as real, then grew bigger, bolder, bloodier, and somehow more true because of it. Truth, in this world, isn't about fact. It's about meaning. The fire crackles louder now, casting shadows that dance like spirits on the walls. Farfar reaches the climax of the tale. Our hero, wounded but unbowed, stands before the gods themselves. He speaks not with arrogance but with honesty. A man who has lived fully, loved fiercely and slept under the stars more nights than not. The gods nod. He is welcomed, not into heaven, but into story. Immortal now, retold forever. When the tale ends, no one claps. That would be strange. Instead, there's a kind of collective sigh. A moment of silence, not out of politeness but reverence. Then slowly the group begins to dissolve. Someone rakes the coals. Someone else shuffles off toward the straw mats. The mood has shifted. Not loud or giddy, but soothed. Fed. Not just with barley stew, but with story. You return to your spot, rolling yourself back into your blanket like a very thoughtful burrito. The longhouse is quieter now, but not silent. The story still hangs in the air. You can feel it in your chest, like a lullaby hummed too low to hear, but not too low to feel. As your eyes close, you realise you're still inside the saga. Not the one Farfar told, maybe, but your saga. You've lived a full day, carried water, fed the fire, shared sleep with snorers and goats and children. You've walked in the cold and dozed in the warmth. You've listened, learned, been part of a world not made to impress, but to endure. And now, like the heroes of old, you're about to cross a different kind of sea, one made of sleep, of drifting firelight and dreams. No bedtime screen, no noise machine, just the steady rhythm of breath around you. A story to sink into, a fire to warm your feet, and the quiet, humbling thought that tomorrow someone might tell a story about you. Even if it's just about how you snored like a dying walrus. You're awake again, but not because you're restless. Not exactly. It's something more subtle, more intentional. A stirring that feels ancient, like your body has remembered something your modern brain forgot. You sit up slowly in the dark, careful not to disturb the aunt curled beside you, or kick Gunner the goat, who has, at some point in the night, nestled himself so close to your legs that he's practically a second pair of boots. You blink into the dim orange glow of the hearth and realise you're not the only one up. There's movement near the fire, someone stoking it gently, adding a split log with practised care. No one speaks. They just nod at you and you nod back. That's enough. Welcome to the Night Watch. This is the quiet shift in the Viking night. Not quite asleep, not fully awake, but essential. The fire has to be maintained. The animals stirred, just enough to make sure none have died or escaped. The house, in all its creaking, living complexity, needs tending. Not because anyone's afraid, but because that's the rhythm. The watch isn't a punishment, it's a privilege. A few people awake while the rest sleep, like eyes in the darkness, guardians with kindling and calm. You move closer to the hearth, rubbing your hands together, absorbing the heat. It's not roaring, just glowing, just alive enough to be friendly. Someone hands you a cup and you sip without asking what it is. It's warm, bitter, herbal. Whatever's floating in it might be bark or moss, possibly both. Doesn't matter. It keeps you awake just enough. Here's your historical fact. In many Viking households, the night was divided naturally into phases, and the watch, that period of wakefulness between first sleep and second sleep, was accepted and even expected. People used this time for quiet chores, prayer, tending animals, or simply sitting. It wasn't a failure of sleep, it was part of it. A built-in pause, a breath between dreams, and that breath feels holy tonight. Outside, the sky is clear. Through the smoke hole you can see stars. Too many to count, too sharp to describe. The kind of sky that humbles you, makes you forget every fake light you've ever lived under. You wrap your cloak tighter and step outside for a moment, your boots crunching on frost-covered earth. The cold bites instantly, but the view is worth it. Above you stretches the North sky, wide, glittering, ancient. You don't see constellations, you see stories. There's the one Farfar told earlier about the wolf chasing the sun, jaws always just behind its fire-bright tail. You look for it now, squinting, and for a moment you swear you see something moving up there, fast and quiet. Here's your quirky fact. Some Viking families believe certain stars could predict the weather or offer signs from the gods. The Wain, what we now call the Big Dipper, was thought to be a cart or a warrior's chariot, sometimes Odin's. If the cart tipped, snow was coming. If it stayed level, a peaceful night. Tonight, it's perfectly level. You decide to take that as a good sign. There's no urgency in this hour, no rush to get things done. Someone nearby is weaving, a small hand loom balanced on their knees. They hum to themselves, off-key and soothing. Another person sharpens a blade slowly, not for war but for cooking. Even at night, life here breathes forward in small, steady ways. And yet, here's the scholarly debate. Was this watch time really that peaceful? Some evidence suggests it may have also been a time of vulnerability, of increased alertness, not just to tend the fire, but to defend the home. Villages could be raided, fires could break out, livestock could be stolen or wander off. Others argue that the watch wasn't filled with anxiety, but intention, a chance to reflect, to connect, to exist in a world stripped of noise. You settle on the latter, because sitting here now in the warm bubble of firelight surrounded by breathing, dreaming people you barely know but already trust, there's no fear, just stillness. You feel like a part of the house itself, one beam in the roof, one coal in the hearth. You head back inside and curl up again, but you don't lie down right away. You sit quietly, knees hugged to your chest, letting the firelight fade across your skin. You think about things you haven't thought about in years. Quiet memories, unfinished thoughts. You don't chase them. You just let them pass, like the stars outside, moving, shimmering, unbothered. The room around you is soft with breath and sleep. You hear someone shift in the straw. A spoon clinks in a bowl. The goat mutters something in his sleep, probably a complaint about sharing his blanket with you. You smile. You lie back down. And now the second sleep begins. You don't even try. You just close your eyes. The fire is warm, the room is full, you've done your part. Sleep comes easily. It always does when you're not trying to win. You're not sleeping. Again. Not for lack of trying, mind you. You're in your usual spot, blanket pulled tight, goat pressed into your feet like an overeager hot water bottle, straw poking your ribs in familiar places. The fire is still glowing low. Everyone else in the longhouse is asleep, or at least pretending to be. But here you are, blinking into the dark, brain buzzing like an early morning mosquito. It's official. You've caught the Viking version of insomnia. But don't worry, you're not alone. While it's tempting to imagine every Norseman and woman drifting effortlessly into glorious, full-bodied sleep night after night, the truth is, they had their off nights too. The creaky, restless, mind-churning nights where nothing feels right, and the inside of your skull is louder than the longhouse itself. Vikings may not have had smartphones or blue light to sabotage their sleep cycles, but they did have stress, pain, bad dreams, and the occasional haunting thought about whether the goat looked at them funny. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb your sleep neighbours, and let out a sigh that sounds way too modern for this room. It's not loud, but somehow it feels intrusive, like you've just dropped a pin in a pond of silence. You hug your knees and stare into the fire's embers, trying to figure out what's got you wide awake. Is it the dream you half remember? That weird ache in your shoulder? Or maybe it's just the cosmic unfairness of waking up for absolutely no reason at 2 a.m. in a house full of people who are clearly better at this than you. Here's your historical fact. While the concept of insomnia as a medical diagnosis didn't exist in Viking times, sleeplessness wasn't unheard of. Old Norse texts reference wakeful nights and restlessness, particularly during times of stress, illness, or spiritual unrest. People might lie awake wondering about the outcome of a voyage, a missing family member, a dispute in the village, or even a sign they saw in a dream. The belief that sleep could be stolen by spirits, curses, or even guilt was common enough to make it into folk stories and remedies. You wander toward the hearth, moving carefully, your blanket still draped over your shoulders like a cape of defeat. Someone else is already there, sitting, cross-legged, poking the fire with a stick. You blink. It's the old woman with the crooked back and the ever-judging eyebrows. She doesn't look surprised to see you. "Can't sleep?" she rasps without looking up. You shake your head. She doesn't offer sympathy, just scoots over and pats the floor beside her. You sit. The fire crackles a little louder, as if grateful for the company. Now for your quirky fact. Some Viking-era folks believed that a sleepless spirit could enter a household and keep people awake. This wasn't some grand myth, just a quiet folk belief, often associated with long winters and unresolved conflicts. To ward it off, families might burn certain herbs in the fire, mugwort, angelica, even bits of pine resin, or sleep with a small iron tool near their heads. Some would leave a token near the door, like a carved wooden figure or a strip of cloth, as a kind of spiritual "do not disturb" sign. The woman beside you mutters something and tosses a small bundle into the flames. It sizzles and releases a smell somewhere between pine and goat breath. You decide not to ask. Here's the scholarly debate that ties all this together. How did Vikings cope with sleeplessness, if they even saw it as a problem? Some researchers argue that irregular sleep wasn't unusual in pre-industrial societies. People didn't expect to sleep straight through the night. They accepted it, got up, walked around, sat by the fire, told stories, prayed, then went back to bed. Others think nighttime wakefulness was more disruptive than we assume, and that folk remedies were a serious attempt to reclaim rest. Either way, no one was reaching for melatonin gummies or trying to hack their circadian rhythms. They just existed in the night. You sit in the firelight for a while, watching shadows flicker on the beams. The room smells like smoke and wool and whatever that herb bundle was. You breathe it in. It's not relaxing per se, but it's grounding. The woman beside you hums a low tune, some half-remembered lullaby from 50 winters ago. You don't recognize it, but your body does. You start to feel heavier, less spinny. And this is the secret, isn't it? You don't fix sleeplessness. You ride it out. You respect it like you'd respect a storm, something inconvenient but natural. You don't panic. You don't reach for another blanket or obsess over how many hours you've got left until sunrise. You just keep the fire company until your body decides it's ready again. Eventually you yawn. The good kind. The kind that starts in your chest and echoes through your jaw. The woman sees it and grunts, satisfied. "Back to bed," she says, waving her stick like a wand. "Dream of something useful." You nod, shuffle away and lie back down. The straw is still pokey. The air still cold. But your shoulders don't feel so tight anymore. Your brain has gone quiet, like a tired guest finally deciding to leave the party. You close your eyes and breathe through your nose, letting the faint herbal smoke carry you back towards stillness. And this time, sleep takes you. Not because you fought it, but because you waited. You wake up to the unmistakable sound of someone retching outside. It's loud. It's ungraceful. It echoes off the side of the longhouse like some kind of medieval foghorn. You hear a few groans from around the room. Someone swears softly in Old Norse, and then, predictably, someone laughs. Welcome to morning in the Viking world, where sleep isn't always interrupted by roosters or the call of duty, but occasionally by the fallout from a truly enthusiastic night of mead. You sit up slowly, blinking against the dim light leaking through the cracks in the walls. Your head is clear, miraculously, but the same can't be said for at least 3 people within throwing distance of your sleeping mat. One man is curled in a position that no sober spine should ever attempt, clutching what looks like a wooden bowl and muttering to himself like he just met Thor in a dream and regrets it deeply. Another is already attempting to stand, only to immediately regret that decision and lie back down with the elegance of a sack of turnips. Ah yes, the Viking hangover. You stretch your arms overhead and rub your eyes, aware of how weirdly lucky you are to have escaped the mead haze. You drank some, sure, everyone did. But either you paced yourself or the gods took pity on you. More likely the latter, because this house is filled with groans, dry mouths, and the unmistakable scent of regret. Here's your historical fact. Vikings drank. A lot. Mead, beer, ale. Sometimes watered down, sometimes not, depending on the occasion. Fermented drinks were a major part of feasting and community bonding, and in some households consumed daily in moderate amounts. But during celebrations like weddings, harvest feasts, or seasonal rites, moderation politely left the longhouse and went to sleep in a snowbank. Those were the nights when stories were told louder, songs grew more questionable, and sleep became optional. You remember last night. Someone passing round a horn of mead so sweet it made your teeth ache. The warmth that spread through your chest. The stories that got wilder as the drink flowed. The one-eyed man who tried to dance and lost both his dignity and his boot. And somewhere between laughing and yawning, you'd peeled away from the group and tucked yourself into your blanket, knowing full well what the morning would bring. Now, as the fire is coaxed back to life and bowls of leftover stew are being reheated, you get to witness the full shambling glory of the Viking morning after. Hair pointing in 10 directions, cloaks worn inside out. Someone is trying to wash their face with a piece of bread, and another is whispering a prayer to Odin that sounds suspiciously like, "Please make the world stop spinning." And now for your quirky fact. One of the common Viking hangover remedies involved eating pickled herring, or any kind of sour preserved fish, first thing in the morning. The idea was to shock the body back into balance. Another method was drinking sour whey, which was exactly as delightful as it sounds. Some even believed in wrapping cold, wet cloths around the neck or wrists to draw the heat from the brain. You eye the bowl being handed to one of your unfortunate neighbours and try not to gag in sympathy. The morning air inside the longhouse is a strange mix of smoke, sweat, and stale alcohol, and you'd think, maybe, that this would be a terrible environment for sleep, but no. Once everyone groans their way into uprightness and takes their first bite of fishy misery, things begin to settle. The rhythm returns, the day begins. But there's still that question scholars love to fight over. Did Vikings really suffer hangovers like we do? Or did their diets, lifestyles, and daily exertion give them some kind of natural resistance? Some argue that fermented drinks were often lower in alcohol than we imagine, meaning fewer brutal consequences. Others say no, they partied hard and paid the price, same as we do, just with fewer electrolytes and more herring. You lie back for a moment. listening to the house shift from suffering to recovery. Someone hums a low tune while stirring the pot. A dog barks outside, a child laughs at a grown man's dramatic attempt to walk upright. Slowly the longhouse exhales. The worst is over. You think about the contrast. How, in your world, a hangover often meant isolation. Headaches suffered under blackout curtains, bottles of water lined up like troops, a desperate, groggy scroll through your phone to see what damage had been done. But here, even hangovers are communal. Public. Shared. No one hides it. No one pretends. You suffer together, loudly, with open mockery and mutual empathy. It's weirdly wholesome. You sit up again, stretch, and are promptly handed a piece of bread smeared with something that might be fish paste or soap. You eat it anyway. Someone claps you on the back hard enough to jostle your teeth. You're officially part of the group now. Surviving a night in the longhouse isn't just about enduring the cold or learning to love goat snores. It's about accepting every part of life, from dreamy sleep to groggy dawns. There's something healing in it. Not the fish paste. That's just vile. But the rhythm, the acceptance, the knowledge that even on your worst mornings, you're surrounded by people who are just as wrecked, just as human, and just as ready to make fun of you while they pass the bucket. And tonight, you'll sleep better than ever, because you earned it. The snow is falling again, slow and steady, like the sky has nothing better to do. From your spot near the longhouse door, you watch fat flakes drift down and settle on the frozen ground, stacking into soft mounds that mute every sound. They touch. It's the kind of snowfall that makes the world feel padded, distant, and a little unreal. You're swaddled in a thick wool cloak, mug in hand, breath rising in little clouds. The longhouse behind you creaks with the usual symphony of shuffles and snorts and half-muttered arguments about who stole whose socks. Inside, it's all warmth and clutter. Outside, the world has been reduced to white silence, and in this moment, between the two, you find something rare. Stillness. There's no agenda today. The snowfall has cancelled it. Not officially. No one here writes anything down, but when the snow falls this thick, this quiet, it tells everyone to slow down. The chores will wait. The fire will keep. And if the goats are smart, they'll stay under the eaves and not wander off to be swallowed whole by the whiteness. So you linger in the doorway, not quite outside, not quite in, hovering in the softest kind of limbo. Here's your historical fact. The Norse calendar wasn't divided by weeks like ours, but by seasons, lunar cycles, and practical rhythms of life. Days weren't measured by hours as much as by light and shadow, work and rest. Snowfall, particularly in winter, wasn't just weather, it was a signal. A pause. Travel halted. Fields slept. People turned inward. Toward hearth, toward kin, toward rest. Not because they romanticized snow, but because you simply couldn't fight it. You accepted it. Folded yourself into it like another layer of fur. You finally retreat back inside, shaking snow from your boots, the door thumping shut behind you. The longhouse is dim, the fire down to glowing orange coals. The usual smell of smoke and wool is joined now by a sweet hint of baking. Someone's trying their luck with flatbread again. A few kids are playing with carved wooden animals in the corner, dragging them through imaginary forests made of fur rugs. One of the older women is combing a child's hair with ruthless precision, muttering what must be ancient Viking swear words under her breath. You take your seat near the hearth, stretch your legs out toward the heat, and let your mind wander. Because here's the secret. Days like this weren't wasted. Not to these people. Doing nothing wasn't laziness. It was part of the cycle. A built-in buffer zone between survival and recovery. You weren't expected to be productive every moment. You were expected to last, and that required sleep. Lots of it. Here's your quirky fact. Vikings were known to take short naps during the day, especially in winter. These weren't frowned upon. In fact, some sagas even mention midday resting as a mark of wisdom, letting the body recover while the world is cold and quiet. A man who napped in winter wasn't weak. He was practical, recharging for the harder work ahead. Some folks would even crawl under furs again after the morning meal and sleep another hour or two, especially if they'd been on watch overnight. The idea of once, You're up, stay up, hadn't been invented yet. Someone yawns loudly across the room, and like a chain reaction, 2 others follow. You feel it too, the soft tug of sleep returning. It's not that you're exhausted, it's just that in this slow, quiet space, your body asks for it. And there's no reason to say no. You glance around. A few people have already nodded off again, cloaks pulled over their heads like makeshift tents. One child is napping in the lap of a very tired sheepdog, who has given up all sense of personal boundaries. The fire hums gently, the snow keeps falling. Here's the scholarly debate for today. Were Viking-era people healthier because of this built-in rest cycle? Some argue yes. Without modern distractions and constant artificial light, they were more attuned to natural sleep rhythms, early to bed, early to rise, with breaks in between. Others point out that the physical hardships of Viking life, poor nutrition, exposure, disease, meant rest was often interrupted or uneven. But the consensus? Sleep was flexible, respected. And unlike in modern times, it wasn't something you had to earn. You lean back against the wall, eyes half closed. The fire's heat tickles your toes. Someone sets a bowl near you, warm and fragrant. You mumble a thank you you're not sure was even heard. Outside, the snow covers everything. Inside, the longhouse breathes slow and deep, like a living thing curled up for winter. There's no noise, no obligation, no voice in your head asking if you've been productive enough. There's just time. Time to rest. Time to reset. Time to sleep if you need it. Again. And so you do. No shame. No schedule. Just sleep. Soft and slow. Folded into the rhythm of the falling snow. You wake up to the sound of singing. Not loud singing, not the drunken mead hall bellowing kind, but something quieter. Softer. Like someone trying not to wake a baby. It threads through the longhouse like smoke, curling around sleeping bodies, echoing faintly off the timber beams. A woman's voice, low and steady, carrying a tune that feels older than the building itself. You don't understand the words, but it doesn't matter. The melody speaks its own language, of frost and firelight and longing you can't name. You blink in the dimness. It's still early, or maybe late. Hard to tell. Time has gotten slippery here. You sit up slowly, wrapping your blanket around your shoulders, and look toward the hearth. There, by the coals, the singer sits with a spindle in hand, spinning wool as her voice spins a story. One of the children is curled next to her, eyes closed, lips parted in the slack peace of real sleep. This is something else entirely. Not bedtime, not the night watch, but something in between. A lullaby moment, a hearth moment, a space carved out in the middle of winter for comfort that doesn't ask anything of you. Here's your historical fact. Lullabies were a common part of Norse domestic life, especially in winter, when children spent long stretches indoors. Women sang not only to babies, but to restless children, to family members recovering from illness, and, yes, to help themselves fall asleep during the long hours of spinning, weaving, or mending by firelight. These songs often contained more than gentle nonsense. They were full of warnings, prayers, and strange poetic metaphors. They sang of trolls in the woods, gods in disguise, and the wind that carried secrets from the sea. You settle back against the wall, letting the singing wash over you. Your limbs are heavy, your eyes sting from the warmth. It's not that you're tired, not exactly. You just feel suspended, floating gently in this quiet house, where voices hum and flames crackle, and people sleep in layers, like sediment in a very cozy canyon. You think about the last time you fell asleep to singing. Maybe when you were a child, maybe never. Maybe it's something you skipped, growing up in a world where bedtime was more about distractions, screens, podcasts, white noise machines, than actual comfort. But this feels intentional, not just background sound, but a message. It's okay to rest now. You're not missing anything. You're already where you belong. Here's your quirky fact. In some Norse households, lullabies included specific instructions for spirits or creatures lurking in the dark. A parent might sing a line telling the huldra, a forest being, to stay away from the windows, or ask the draugr not to disturb the baby's dreams. These were less about literal fear and more about wrapping sleep in protective language. The idea that words repeated softly could weave a net strong enough to hold off the night. The song ends eventually, not with a dramatic finish, but by fading, like smoke trailing off into the rafters. The singer doesn't acknowledge her audience. She just ties off her wool, stretches her arms, and returns to her tasks. The child sleeps on, unaware that anything has changed. The longhouse has dipped again into its low, rhythmic breathing. You sit there, wrapped in warmth, thinking about how much noise we cram into modern bedtime, how we drown our own thoughts with ambient noise and algorithms and 1.5x speed audiobooks, all so we don't have to sit in the quiet with ourselves. But here, the quiet is the point, and sometimes, when it feels too big, someone sings into it, not to fill it up, but to float in it with you. Here's the scholarly debate that threads through this like a spindle. Were these lullabies purely functional, meant only to quiet children, or did they serve a deeper social role? Some historians argue they were simply practical, a way to manage children in confined winter quarters. Others believe they were a form of oral tradition, especially for women, who used song to preserve myths, pass down wisdom, and insert themselves quietly into the cultural record. After all, most sagas were written by men, but these songs? These were the women's stories, sung to the next generation night after night. And you wonder, as you lie back down and pull your cloak over your shoulder, what songs your ancestors might have heard, what stories were murmured in the dark to lull them to sleep, what words they carried unknowingly into dreams, and if those words, in some distant way, still live in your bones. The fire crackles again. A gust of wind brushes the longhouse wall. Somewhere, someone mutters in their sleep, probably arguing with a ghost or a goat. You smile just a little and let your eyes fall shut. The air is soft, the night is slow, and somewhere inside you the song keeps playing, even after you sleep. It's deep night again, that thick velvet kind where the dark doesn't just sit outside your window. It curls around your ribs and settles behind your eyes. The fire has gone low, just a soft underglow beneath the ash. Most of the longhouse is silent, save for the occasional creak of wood or the gentle exhale of someone turning in their sleep. Even the goats have stopped their usual drama. And yet, you're awake again. Not out of worry, not even out of restlessness this time. You just are. Awake, in the quiet, breathing with the house like it's one big dreaming animal. You roll onto your back and stare up at the rafters. Your eyes have adjusted now, so you can make out the shadow lines of the beams and the dangling herbs someone hung to dry weeks ago. Their outlines sway slightly even though there's no breeze. You wonder if they ever fall on people in the night. You kind of hope so, just to keep things interesting. This moment, this middle-of-the-night calm, might feel foreign to your modern mind, trained as it is to associate wakefulness with failure. But here, no one sees it that way. It's just part of the cycle. Sleep, wake, drift, return. A slow tide. You don't fight wakefulness here. You just live with it until it changes. You sit up, quietly pulling your cloak around you. No one stirs. You pad softly across the floor to the hearth, careful not to trip over the outstretched foot of someone who sleeps like they died in that position. You stir the coals with a stick until the ember glow brightens a little, warm enough to see by. You toss on a small split log and wait as it catches, flame lapping gently upward like a cat stretching after a nap. Here's your historical fact. The idea of segmented sleep, what we now call first sleep and second sleep, wasn't just a Viking thing. It was a common human pattern for centuries, especially in pre-industrial societies. People would go to bed shortly after sunset, sleep for several hours, then wake naturally for an hour or two before returning to sleep. During that middle window, people might pray, tend to chores, talk quietly with others who were awake, or simply sit by the fire and think. It wasn't insomnia, it was normal, natural, even welcome. You sit there now, watching the fire reawaken, feeling its warmth on your knees. Your breath fogs slightly in the cold air. Somewhere behind you, someone sighs deeply in their sleep, the kind of sigh that sounds like a whole life being exhaled. You find yourself matching their breath, letting yours slow too. No urgency, no rush to be anywhere but here. And here's your quirky fact. Norse households sometimes used this midnight hour for quiet rituals, especially in winter. A woman might consult runes or whisper a question to the fire. A man might make an offering to a small idol near the door, a smear of fat, a sliver of meat, to honour ancestors or ward off illness. Not grand ceremonies, just quiet gestures in the dark. This wasn't superstition exactly. It was connection. A way of placing yourself gently in the universe before you laid your head down again. You pick up a small bone carving from near the fire. A figure worn smooth from years of hands passing it around. You don't know what it means. You don't need to. You set it back down just as carefully. The fire pops, and for a moment the longhouse flickers with dancing shadows. It's like the house itself is dreaming, and the fire is its heartbeat. And now for the academic tension. Some historians argue that the idea of segmented sleep was universal, until artificial lighting changed everything, until we began forcing ourselves to stay awake longer, compressing all rest into one uninterrupted block. Others believe segmented sleep was always culturally specific, tied to geography, climate, and labour patterns. But whichever side is right, one thing is certain. Modern life has made us afraid of our own wakefulness. We call it insomnia. We try to fix it. Here, it's not a problem. It's a pause. You rest your chin on your knees and stare into the flame. You think of all the nights you've spent trying to escape moments like this, scrolling, distracting, avoiding your own brain like it was a roommate you didn't want to talk to. But this place doesn't let you run. It sits you down, hands you a blanket and says, stay with it. And somehow, in doing so, the wakefulness becomes lighter, softer, a passage instead of a prison. After a while, your eyes start to droop again. You add one last log to the fire, small enough not to wake anyone, large enough to last until dawn. You stretch slowly, joints cracking in protest, and then you return to your blanket, to the warmth of shared breath and the strange comfort of dozens of people sleeping within arm's reach. You lie back down, eyes closed. You can still see the fire behind your eyelids. You can still hear the faint rise and fall of snores. You can still feel the rhythm of the house, like a lullaby you didn't know you remembered. And just like that, you fall asleep again. No noise, no effort, no shame, just sleep, as natural as snow. It's morning again, but it doesn't hit like a jolt. It rises slowly, like mist curling off a lake, seeping into the longhouse one breath at a time. Light sneaks in through the chinks in the roof, not bright, just enough to turn the shadows soft. You're already half awake when it reaches your eyelids, that peaceful kind of waking where your body doesn't need permission to move. You stretch under the blanket, limbs loose and warm, your joints creaking gently like old wood, and for once, you're not reaching for anything. No phone, no to-do list, just the quiet rhythm of a new day beginning. Around you, the house stirs gradually. People blink into the soft light, some yawning, others still wrapped tight like burritos of fur and wool. A child rolls over and sleepily steals someone's blanket. The blanket's owner retaliates with a gentle elbow and a grumble that could mean anything from good morning to I will duel you later. The goat snorts. A woman by the hearth begins clanging two pots together, not out of necessity, but because she's that kind of morning person. You're learning that every house, Viking or not, has at least one. You sit up, rubbing your face, and inhale deeply. Smoke, peat, wool, and something bready, flatbread or porridge, or maybe both if you're lucky. The air is still cold, but it clings to your skin less aggressively now. Either the fire's warming the room, or your body's stopped noticing. Hard to tell. Either way, you feel rested. Not just slept, but rested. That deep cellular kind that makes your muscles hum and your thoughts slow down. Here's your historical fact. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements, like those in Iceland and Greenland, suggest that homes were designed not just for practicality but for rest. The layout of longhouses, with communal beds lining the walls and the hearth in the centre, wasn't random. It maximised heat retention, encouraged shared body warmth, and made it easier to wake and sleep in rhythm with others. Bedding was often layered and rearranged based on the season, and people slept in clothes designed for both movement and comfort. Everything was geared towards sustainability, not efficiency. Rest wasn't a reward. It was woven into the architecture of life. You watch as the room gradually shifts from sleep to motion. A pair of boys start shoving each other over whose turn it is to collect firewood. A mother pulls a comb through her daughter's hair with the resigned strength of someone who's fought this battle many times before. An older man coughs so dramatically you're not sure if he's dying or just trying to clear a century of phlegm. The whole place comes alive without hurry, just motion after stillness like breath, and you're in the middle of it. Not outside looking in, but part of this slow, sacred cycle. Here's your quirky fact. In some Norse households there was a specific term, morgenstilla, used to describe the stillness of early morning. It wasn't silence exactly, but a kind of hush that came before the day fully woke up. During this time, it was considered bad manners to speak loudly or disturb others unnecessarily. Children were taught to tread softly. Adults used the moment for prayer, quiet tasks, or gentle storytelling. It was a cultural acknowledgement that waking was as important as sleeping, something to be eased into, not rushed. You feel that stillness now, even as the longhouse hums to life. No one's shouting, no one's checking a clock. Tasks are being done, sure, but at a pace that doesn't feel forced. You help pass around bowls of food, your fingers brushing warm wood and warm hands. You sip something that tastes like porridge and feels like comfort. No one asks you what you plan to do today. No one expects a list. Here, being present is enough. Now for the scholarly debate. Some experts argue that this kind of lifestyle, slow waking, natural light cycles, communal rhythms, fostered a stronger sense of emotional and physical well-being in early societies. Others point out the harsh conditions, the risk of disease, the relentless winter, and say romanticizing it ignores real hardship. But perhaps both are true. Life was hard, but sleep, real, unhurried, deeply human sleep, wasn't another form of labour. It was a built-in kindness, a resilience strategy, a quiet rebellion against the cold. You finish your meal and lean back, bowl still warm in your hands. The house is now fully awake, but it hasn't lost that softness. People are brushing out their hair by the hearth, tightening braids, mending cloaks, wrapping bundles for the day ahead. There's laughter, but it's low and close, like the sound of a river just under the ice. You glance around and realise something. You haven't thought about the time in days. Not once. Not what time you fell asleep. Not how many hours you got. Not whether it was good sleep. You slept when you were tired. You woke when the light found you. And your body, shockingly, has kept up. It's remembered something old and steady. Something built into your bones long before alarm clocks and caffeine and email. Something like peace. You gather your cloak and stand. The floor's still cold, but you don't mind. Your joints feel ready. Your mind feels quiet. And your breath, as it leaves your mouth in a little puff of warmth, tells you one thing louder than words ever could. You slept well. Not perfectly, not efficiently, just well. The Viking way. It's your last night in the longhouse. You don't know how you know it, but you do. It hums in your bones, low and quiet, like the final note of a song lingering in the rafters. You sit by the fire again, blanket wrapped around your shoulders, staring into the coals like they might hold a secret worth keeping. Outside, the wind curls against the wooden walls, less fierce now, more like a hand brushing over the roof to say, "It's time." Everyone else is moving through the night like they always do, routine baked into muscle memory. Someone's scraping. Bowls clean with the edge of a spoon. Someone else is humming while folding up a fur, their movements slow, like sleep is already pulling at them. There's nothing special about tonight, not on the surface. But under it, everything feels softer, heavier, like the house itself knows you're almost gone. You sit with it, this quiet weight. You think of all the nights before, when sleep was elusive or came in waves, when you lay awake beside snoring bodies and twitching dogs, when you listened to stories spun like thread and watched the stars through a smoke hole in the roof. You've learned to exist in the in-between, in the hush between the hearth and the dark, between dreaming and waking, between the cold world outside and the warm breath of shared rest inside. Here's your historical fact. In the Viking world, departure was often marked by a ritual of sorts. Not always grand, but meaningful. A bowl of food packed for the journey. A blessing murmured over the forehead. A small token slipped into a traveller's hand. Sleep too, had its own kind of farewell. Before a long voyage, warriors and farmers alike took time to rest deeply, not just to restore their bodies, but because they understood. The night before a change matters. Rest wasn't weakness, it was preparation. Tonight, your sleep will carry you out of this place, and something in you wants to make it count. Around the longhouse, beds are claimed. Blankets are tugged into place. A few people speak in low voices, the kind of conversation that lives in twilight. Personal, unfinished, almost whispered. You hear laughter from someone you never heard laugh before. You see a warrior delicately braid a child's hair while pretending he doesn't care about getting it right. You see the ordinary magic of people winding down together, without fanfare or urgency, just being until sleep takes them. Here's your quirky fact. It's believed that some Norse people had specific sleep charms they whispered before bed. Not full-blown spells, but little rhyming phrases passed down through generations. A few lines about safe travels through dreams, about keeping nightmares at bay, or about calling for a gentle dawn. They weren't written down, but archaeologists and scholars have found fragments of similar rhymes tucked into folk songs, lullabies, and even burial rites. The idea that sleep is a journey, not just into the unconscious, but into another world, was deeply rooted. You wonder what kind of charm you'd whisper tonight, if you knew the right words. Something about keeping this warmth with you. Something about not forgetting how this kind of rest felt. Something simple, like, let me sleep the way I used to before I knew what anxiety was. Now for the scholarly debate. One last time. Were Viking sleep patterns really more restful? Or are we just layering our modern exhaustion onto a fantasy of the past? Some historians caution against romanticizing the Viking world. They endured hunger, sickness, cold, grief. Sleep wasn't always peaceful. But others argue that for all their hardship, the Vikings understood something we've forgotten. That sleep is not a problem to be solved, but a natural rhythm to live with. They didn't try to control it. They shaped their world around it. Fires were tended, rooms were designed, rituals were shared. Sleep was a part of life, not an interruption from it. You lie down in your usual spot, feeling the cool earth beneath the furs, the familiar scratch of straw poking through. Someone nearby coughs in their sleep. Another mumbles something that sounds suspiciously like, "Don't take my bread." You pull your cloak tighter, shift once, then settle. The fire dims into embers, the light slipping away like a hand pulling back a curtain. And you feel it, the rhythm, that ancient patient pull that says it's time to drift, not vanish, not escape, just drift. You close your eyes, you listen to the breath of the longhouse, slow and shared and real. You don't think about what tomorrow holds, you don't plan, you don't resist. You sleep like a Viking, like someone who knows that rest is not a luxury. It's the ground beneath you. It's the warmth that carries you. It's the story that continues, even when your eyes are closed. So that's it. You've made it. Not just through a Viking night, or even 30 sections of fur, fire, and the fine art of sleeping with goats, but through something much stranger. You've slipped out of your own time. You've walked into a longhouse full of warmth and snoring strangers, and found a rhythm that doesn't check a clock, a rhythm that accepts you as you are. Restless, curious, sleep-deprived, and entirely human. You've watched the fire burn down and come back again. You've listened to old stories told by older voices. You've tasted herring you probably regret. You've curled up in shared blankets, staggered through slow mornings, and sat wide-eyed during the night watch with nothing but a mug of bark tea and your thoughts for company. You've remembered something your modern self didn't know it forgot. That sleep isn't a prize you earn. It's a birthright. A pause. A sacred rhythm older than electricity, older than beds with posture-correcting foam, older than the idea that your worth can be measured in how early you get up. And here's what you've learned, without ever needing a lecture. The people of Viking times didn't sleep better than you because they were stronger, or tougher, or immune to anxiety. They just weren't at war with rest. They didn't try to outsmart it. They lived by the firelight in sync with cold nights and quiet mornings, inside homes designed for survival and softness. Sleep was part of the architecture, part of the culture, something to do together. Not hidden in separate rooms behind closed doors and locked phones. You're tired now. The good kind, not the bone-deep burnout kind, not the I'll just scroll until my eyes shut kind, but the kind that feels like being lowered gently into still water. Safe, steady, weightless. Your breath has already slowed. Your limbs are heavier now, and somewhere, deep in your mind, the longhouse still glows. The fire's still lit. The goats are still snoring. Maybe when you wake up next, you'll be back in your own bed. Maybe you'll still carry a bit of the rhythm with you. A slower morning, a deeper exhale, a better blanket. Maybe you'll look at your own nights not as something to fix, but something to share. With yourself, with your breath, with the dark. Sleep is still here, still warm, still yours.